Hey guys, tonight we're going to Tudor, England. The golden trap where power, scandal, and seduction meet under the flickering light of a candle. If you've ever thought that modern relationships are tricky, imagine a place where the king can change your life with just a glance, or even end it. Welcome to the forgotten lives of royal mistresses. People spoke about these women in hushed tones, painted over their pictures and family portraits, and often made them disappear from the official story. But don't be fooled. They were there, lurking in the shadows, manipulating the game as much as they were being played. And just so we're clear, you probably won't survive this. Not with your head, anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me what city you're in and what time it is as you watch this. I love knowing who else is going to be at Tudor tonight. Now, turn off the bright lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's start our journey into the world of horror tonight together. You step into a world where the air always smells a little bit of rose water and political worry. It is sometime in the early 1500s. You're standing just outside the King Henry VIII court. You're not important yet, but you're important enough to be allowed inside the palace, close enough to see how ambitious everyone is. The halls are filled with silks and jewels, and people are saying nice things to each other quietly. People dressed in fancy clothes walk past you, looking like ghosts. There are men with curled beards and feathered hats, and women whose gowns are so wide they could knock over a small army if they turn too fast. The court is very fancy, but if you spend just 5 minutes listening instead of looking, you'll hear it. Every compliment has a hidden meaning, and every laugh is a sign of something more. Here, everyone is both the actor and the audience. Everyone wants something, advancement and protection, and the king's gaze is the most valuable thing of all. When Henry VIII walks into a room, you can feel it before you see him. The mood changes. There's a pause while they talk. It's as if the whole world is holding its breath. Henry isn't just a man. He's like the sun around which everyone else goes, whether they like it or not. If the sun shines on one woman for a bit longer, then something happens. She'll be sitting closer at banquets, wearing nicer clothes, and she'll be given a locket with a small carved H. Then, people will start spreading rumors. Have you heard about Lady So and so? Rumor has it that she can travel faster than a horse or a pigeon. And if the rumors are true, that woman may soon find herself in a position of power that she never imagined, but at a high personal cost. Mistresses aren't just lovers. They're walking time bombs. Their status is a threat to everyone in the court, including the queen and other noble houses. They might get gifts, land, and jewels, and have servants, but they could easily lose everything. The king is kind and charming, but he doesn't stay loyal for long. When it cools down, everyone else does too. You walk through the garden paths where these liaisons often begin. It's half about the investment and half about the strategy. The hedges are tall, and the layout of the garden is like a chessboard. Young women who work as maids of honor are subtly warned by their mothers. Be charming, but not too charming. Try to catch the king's eye, but don't hold on to it for too long. It's a game where there are no rules, only consequences. One of the strangest things about Tudor, mistress. Everyone knows this, but nobody says it out loud. There is no official title for the king's current favorite. If they don't have a crown, they can't sit in parliament. You're not a queen, but you have the king's ear, and that gives them a really scary amount of power. But it's not all drama and diamonds. In the quieter hours, late at night, behind embroidered curtains, the women who hold these roles sit alone. They wonder how long their favor will last, what the queen thinks, and what comes next. For every person who rose, there were dozens who fell silently and without ceremony. And let's not forget the less glamorous side of it. Being the king's mistress often meant that people would talk about her behind her back. You might be called a homewrecker in court, or have your name in an anonymous pamphlet. If you do something wrong, your family might be punished or get a better deal. Sometimes the price is even higher: prison, banishment, or worse. But despite the risks, young women still wanted to be noticed. Why? For many people, it was one of the only ways to change their fate. In old-fashioned England, marriage was rarely about love. He was not a firstborn son or the heir to a large fortune. Your future was basically decided when you were born. But catch the king's attention. You could skip all that. You could even become a duchess, or, for the most daring, a queen. This is what the academic debate is all about. Were these mistresses victims of a system that was designed to take advantage of them? Or are they people who were aware of the system and chose to take advantage of it? Some scholars say that the court was like a golden cage that used beauty and charm to trick people. Others say that these women were very clever, using flirtation as a weapon. As is often the case, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Tonight, you're not just reading about these women. You're in their shoes. You're walking with them through gardens, laughing at the king's jokes, hiding letters behind tapestries. You're standing at the window, your hands shaking as you wait to see if that knock means danger or another night of secret power. So relax. This isn't a fairy tale, but it's not a tragedy either. It's not one thing or the other, but somewhere in between. It's something very human. And tomorrow morning, when you brush your teeth or scroll your phone, you might just feel a little bit of softness under your fingertips. People first hear her name when they are in the presence chamber, after someone makes a joke and has a drink. Her name is Elizabeth Blunt, but everyone calls her Bessie. In the close-knit world of courtiers, they might refer to someone as if they think they know that person, even if they don't actually know them well. You follow the conversation like a stray scent through the palace corridors until you catch the full story, or at least the version that survives the retelling. She wasn't the most beautiful girl at the royal court, they say, but there was something special about her. She had a kind look about her and a gentle nature that hid her sharp intuition. And most importantly, she was the first known mistress of Henry VIII. It starts off easy enough. You are in the early 1510s now, and the court is still new. Henry is young, only about 20, and sporty. He has that youthful energy that isn't yet clouded by paranoia or gout. He's just married Catherine of Aragon, and while their political alliance is strong, there's one major problem. There is no surviving male heir. Then, 17-year-old Bessie arrives. She is the maid of honor to the queen. He is charming, quick-witted, and a good dancer. That last part is very important. The court dances are not just a fun activity. They're an audition. Every step and every turn she makes is a performance of elegance, fertility, and obedience. You see Bessie on the floor, looking ahead, but always aware of who's watching. Henry sees what's going on, and after that things always go the same way. They exchange small tokens and have quiet conversations behind heiress curtains. Soon, the tension grows and the gossip spreads. What's interesting is that Bessie doesn't get involved in any scandals. Not right away. There's nothing dramatic, no jewels, no big announcements. She becomes the royal favorite, as if it's just the next part of her job. And when she becomes pregnant, yes, with the king's child, there's no big reaction from the public. What happens next is the reason. In 1519, Bessie has a baby boy, and not just any son. Henry Fitzroy, the king's first acknowledged illegitimate child. You can almost hear the gas that runs through the Tudor nobility. Henry VIII was very focused on his legacy and on having a son. Now he is proof that he can have a healthy son. People are saying that the problem must be Catherine, and this changes everything. Fitzroy is a symbol of hope. He is a living example of what the Tudorine could be if only a legitimate son would arrive. Henry is so proud and pleased with himself that he gives the boy a lot of titles, including Duke of Richmond and Somerset. You watch, amazed, as a child who is not your own is treated like a prince. At first, the rules seem different. And what about Bessie? She doesn't try to get more. That's what makes her different. Later mistresses want to be crowned, but Bessie wants to win in the long run. She's quietly married to a respectable nobleman, Gilbert Talboys, and lives a quiet life. She leaves the court's inner circle before the situation can change for the worse for her. You might ask yourself if that was her choice or if it was someone else's plan. This is still something that historians have different opinions on. Some people say she was just a girl who got lucky, caught the king's eye, and wisely retired once the king's interest in her had gone. Others think that she was made way for more important royal families who wanted to have more strategic daughters. No matter what happens, Bessie is not killed like many other women who get too close to the throne. Shame, trial, and sometimes death. But let's think about a strange little twist. Bessie Blunt's son, Fitzroy, was once thought to be a possible future king. Henry's advisors talked about how to make him legitimate in a different timeline, just one twist to fade away. You might have heard that King Henry VIII was born to a mistress, not a queen. Fitzroy had everything: his own court, tutors, and military training. But, as with all good things, his story came to an end all too soon. He dies at 17, probably from tuberculosis, and with him disappears the closest thing Henry ever had to a male successor during his lifetime. You now see Bessie differently. You don't see her as just a minor character, but as a very important person. She was the first mistress, and she gave birth to a prince. Her story teaches us that power doesn't always show itself in an obvious way. Sometimes it quietly says something and then leaves. Here's a fun fact that you won't usually find in textbooks. It said that Bessie once danced a series of dances based on the ideas of fortune and fame right before the king noticed her. Was that just a coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the teachers really were just acting like that. Now, let's talk about the queen. Catherine of Aragon was a very religious and dignified woman, and she knew it. But what could she do? In Tudor England, the queen was not allowed to protest. It was in how she carried herself, despite having been betrayed. Catherine doesn't get angry in public. Instead, she focuses more on being religious, loyal, and showing that she is calm and strong. You wonder what she really thought of Bessie. Did she pity her, hate her, dismiss her? That silence is also part of the story. What makes Bessie's story so interesting is that we forget her so easily. She isn't in Berlin. She doesn't become a queen or a victim of an axe. She isn't the person who started the Protestant Reformation. She's just Bessie, cute, clever, and quick to get out of difficult situations. She wins the king's attention, has his son, and walks away without any harm to her reputation. In this drama full of blood, love, and politics, that's really surprising. And here's the irony. She doesn't do a lot, but she changes a lot. She sets the precedent. She shows that mistresses aren't just a distraction, they're players. All the women who come after her know what's possible and what it might cost. You quickly learn that in Tudor England, no one arrives at court by accident, especially not the women. Every embroidered bodice and careful smile is the result of a very tough training regime. In fact, it would make a modern royal finishing school look like summer camp. From a moment a noble girl takes her first steps on a marble floor, she is being trained to be useful, graceful, silent, and when needed, dazzling when required, and above all, valuable. Tonight, you will experience the life of a well-mannered young lady who is expected not only to serve, but also to be noticed. You're inside an old, windy mansion in the countryside. The air smells of beeswax and damp wool, and everything echoes a bit too much. Here, a young girl named Margaret has just turned 6. Her way of curtsying is already being corrected by her governess. "No, your hand must be soft like velvet," she murmurs, gently moving Margaret's fingers. It's not just about manners. It's a way of surviving. By the age of 10, Margaret is dancing with a book balanced on her head. She can say prayers in Latin and knows how to pass a goblet without spilling. Even better, she's starting to understand how the court works. The way her mother speaks quietly when she writes letters. The way her father's mood changes depending on whose seal is stamped at the bottom. No one tells her directly, but the message is clear. Your body represents your family's goals. She's learning how to work for the royal court. Yes, but more specifically for proximity. Close to queens, close to kings, close to opportunity. Mistresses don't just appear beside the throne. They're cultivated, wrapped in layers of pedigree and polish. The goal isn't necessarily to become one, but if everything goes well, you'll be ready. When Margaret was 14, she arrived at the royal court. She was wearing perfume and satin slippers. She's now officially a maid of honor, which is both a privilege and a lot of work. The queen, whoever she is at the time, has a group of young women around her. Their job is to go with her, make her feel good, sing when she asks, dance when she says the word, and not look at what they will definitely see. There are affairs, power plays, and poisonous alliances, but they're always played out with a smile. Being a maid of honor is like walking into a lion's den wearing perfume made of steak. You're being watched all the time. The king is watching you, as are the other courtiers, the foreign ambassadors, and the older ladies who are always watching you like hawks in velvet. There's a lot of pressure to be bright, but not too bright. Be funny, but not smart enough to be dangerous. You learn to speak in clever riddles, to blush at the right moment, and to cry just enough at a sad song without making a mess of yourself. And then, of course, you learn how to flirt without actually flirting. This is an art form, and it's not optional. A look that lasts a little bit longer. Make your sleeve slightly bigger so that you can see a little bit of your wrist. A curtsy held just a little bit deeper when the king passes by. You're taught these things by older women who've seen it all and by men who pretend not to be watching, even though they're definitely watching. Here's the surprising part. But this doesn't mean you should try to be the king's mistress. But if you are, it better be on your terms. The court is full of stories to warn people. Girls who got too popular too quickly and then lost it all very quickly. Girls who misunderstood a smile and found themselves in trouble. Girls who said no at the wrong time and then left to get married or disappeared into obscurity. There's a small detail here that's almost funny because it's so stupid. Some noble families would make their daughters stand out. Not for scandal exactly, but for favor. If the king liked a person's daughter, he might give her land, a title for her brother, or a nice job for her father. One of the more well-known stories is about a family who dressed their daughter in special silk from abroad. These silks were rare and very thin, and they only wore them for a single royal hunt. She was treated like a rare and valuable bird. And yes, she got noticed. Did she wanna? That's not so easy to answer. The real tragedy is her. The line between preparation and exploitation was very thin. Were these girls in control or being controlled? Modern historians argue both sides. Some people say that these young women were treated like sex objects to be traded for influence. Others say they were in control of their own lives, testing the limits of power in a world where marriage was seen as a trap and love was a luxury. You watch Margaret learn to walk that tightrope. She becomes more and more skilled, funny, and aware of her actions and their reasons. She learns that attention can be used like money. You can spend it carefully, save it, or use it as a weapon. And then one day it happens. Margaret catches the king's eye. She doesn't know how. Maybe it was the song she sang at the winter ball. Maybe the deep green of her gown reminded him of something or someone. But then he suddenly stops talking when she speaks and smiles when she curtsies. He looks at her and she starts breathing faster. She is not excited, but she is thinking carefully because now the situation has changed. Her friends see it too. Some people are jealous, while others are cautious. The queen doesn't say anything, but during dinner, her eyes were clearly showing that she was thinking about something else. Margaret is invited to more events and is given a better seat at the hunt. A small gold ring appears on her pillow with no note. Everyone knows what this means, but nobody says it. This is how it starts. It doesn't start with big fireworks, but with small changes in what people are paying attention to. All the training and years of teaching have led up to this moment, and she has to ask herself, is this what I want? Can I control the twist? There's one final twist that will stay with you as you drift back from Margaret's world into your own. Many of these girls were taught from birth to suppress their instincts, to act virtuous and innocent, and then one day they're expected to change, to use seduction to survive. If they fail, they are ignored as if the script was never theirs. So, when you're relaxing and thinking about Tudors, remember that before they were lovers, they were learners. They learned about discipline, ambition, and secret games. They did their best, often not knowing what would come next. You're standing in the middle of Whitehall Palace, watching history start to crumble like a wooden roof in a storm. It's all thanks to two sisters. They were not royalty, and they were not nobles of the highest rank. Just two daughters of the Boleyn family. They are well-placed and well-timed, and depending on who you ask, they are dangerously ambitious. Tonight, you move from Bessie Blunt's easy rise to the Boleyn sisters' amazing rise. You're about to find out how confusing, exciting, and competitive things can get when people's ambition is passed down through their family. It's hard to say how much of a problem the Binns were just by being there. Their father, Sir Thomas Boleyn, was a diplomat who knew how to survive, and their mother, Elizabeth Howard, came from one of the oldest and most noble families in England. The girls, Mary and Anne, had a good life, but not a royal one. When the Boleyn sisters were 10, no one thought they would be a threat to the monarchy in the future. But that's exactly what they became. First up, Mary. You meet her in 1520, just back from the glamorous French court, where she had apparently learned how to be charming, subtle, and good at talking to men who could easily destroy your family. She arrives at Henry VII court with red cheeks, a loud laugh, and no idea she's about to become the king's mistress. Or maybe she doesn't. That's part of the mystery. Mary Boleyn doesn't write letters full of clever plans or revolutionary statements. She just appears, says the right things, and immediately Henry notices her. All of a sudden, she's eating at the king's table. She's also entered in the same horse races. She is mentioned in court poems that use indirect compliments. And of course, Liebe, she disappears from history just as quickly as she appeared. But not before two children are born, Catherine and Henry. And here's where the real academic debate begins. Some historians think Henry VIII was the father of one or both of Mary's children. Others say it was her husband, William Carey, who was a member of the king's private chamber. There are no definite answers, but there's a small possibility that Henry VIII may have had two illegitimate children with Mary and not told anyone about them. Then Anne arrives. She appears suddenly, like a match thrown into dry brushwood. She may not be the most traditionally beautiful, at least according to the standards of the Tudor, but she has an attractive way about her that often characterizes women who are confident and self-assured. She has clever eyes and a clever mouth. She is not as friendly as Mary. She is mysterious, intelligent, and can say no in a way that is captivating. When Anne arrives at court, she has already learned from her sister's experience. She knows what happens when a girl says yes too quickly, so she doesn't. Henry always gets what he wants, and keeps saying no to him in a polite, flirtatious, and exasperating way. It drives him crazy. A casual flirtation starts out as something fun, but then it turns into something more serious. He writes her letters that are full of passion, emotion, and embarrassment, asking her to be his girlfriend. Here's the thing. Annie doesn't want to be just another mistress. She wants to feel safe. She wants to have a say in things. She wants more, maybe even a crown. For the first time, you see a royal mistress have an influence not just on the king's heart, but also on the policies of a nation. Anne's presence starts to spread and affect everything. Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, his relationship with Rome, and how stable the whole kingdom was. Quiet voices become loud. Parliament is in chaos. The Pope won't allow a divorce and is determined. It's not just a love story anymore. It's a big problem for the country. While all this is happening, you have to imagine Mary watching from the sidelines. She's married again, now to a man who's much lower in status than she is, and she's slowly becoming less popular while her sister becomes more and more popular. There's real tension between them. Some people say it was because they were jealous, while others say it was because they felt sorry for her. One sister plays the game fairly and loses. The other breaks the game completely and changes the board. Eventually, and becomes queen. You already know how this ends. Heads and axes and treason trials. But tonight, we're not quite there yet. We're still in the exciting moment when Anne Boleyn, who used to be a lady-in-waiting, a flirtation, and a mistress, is now England's queen. It's the first time it's happened. It's scary, and it's a big step across different social groups. But she didn't get there on her own. Here's a small detail that is rarely included in the soap opera versions, and had a network. Her mother, her brother George, her allies who wanted to change things, and even foreign ambassadors helped make her rise to power possible. She wasn't just dealing with the politics of the court. She was practically orchestrating them. This means that the Binns sisters were more than just characters in a love story. They caused a huge change. Even experts can't agree on what to do with that. Was Anne a feminist icon who used her power in a world that tried to take it away from her? Or was she a master manipulator who used desire as a tool to cause religious and political chaos in an entire nation? Again, the answer changes depending on who you ask. Maybe that's why you can't forget her. After everything that has happened, it is the two sides of the Boleyn sisters that you cannot forget. Mary gave the king what he wanted and was then thrown away. Anne, who rejected him and was crowned, only to fall even harder. Two sisters, two approaches. The king and his court are the same, but their lives are very different. And as you look at the silk and the scandal, you start to see a pattern. One that future mistresses will try to follow or avoid. Say yes too early and you're out of the picture. If you say no for too long, you risk losing everything. But if you time it just right, you might change the world. You walk with Mary Boleyn now. Not the famous Anne's sister. Not the one written off in the margins. But Mary herself and the quiet shadow she never really escaped. Everyone knows her name, of course. It is usually served with Anne's. It's always second. She was always the other girl from Berlin. But tonight, you get to know the real her, the one who lived the full Tudor experience. Loved, thrown away, married, widowed, remarried, and always underestimated. When you first meet Mary, she's laughing. Not the nervous, high-pitched giggle of a flirtatious woman trying to charm her way through a tense moment, but something deeper, freer. She's in France with Queen Mary Tudor's group. She was with her when she briefly got married to Louis IV in the 12th century, but the marriage was not a success. The Queen's life quickly becomes difficult, but Mary finds something completely different. Education, experience, possibly even scandal. The French court is decadent and loose with its affections. People still say that Mary became the lover of the new king, France the Thirst, while she was there. He allegedly called her his English mare, which is as gross and sexist as it sounds. Whether it's true or not, by the time Mary returns to England, she will already be seen as experienced, and that won't change easily in Tudor society. So when she enters the English court again, people look at her with suspicion and a touch of judgment. But that doesn't stop Henry VII from noticing her. Their relationship starts without anyone knowing. You imagine her at a fancy dress party, wearing a mask, with the light of a candle on her chestnut-colored hair, and her eyes catching the attention of the kings in the crowd. They have a few dances, then have dinner together. After that, she is chosen to be elevated. Mary is now the king's mistress. Her family is happy to see her get the royal attention. For the barons, it's a good start. For Mary, it's a trap. The thing about being the king's mistress, especially in the early 1520s, is that there's no way to know what will happen next. You don't get a title. You don't get an estate. You get rumors. You might get the odd gift, a kind word in court poetry, or even a small portrait. But more often than not, people forget about them, and Mary is no exception. Henry quickly becomes bored or distracted. He moves on. Mary, like many before her, is married to William Carey, a respectable member of the court who is high enough in status to make the whole thing look perfect. The wedding happens quickly. There is no fuss. The message is clear. She has done what she needed to do. But here's where things get complicated. Mary had 2 children, Catherine in 1524 and Henry in 1526. The timing of her affair with the king is just too convenient. Henry VIII never officially recognized either child as his own, but there were rumors about this. Did he have 2 children with Mary Boleyn who weren't his? Is little Henry Carey actually a royal bastard hidden in plain sight? Historians still had different opinions on this. There is no solid proof, just a bunch of evidence that points to something but doesn't really prove it. And that intriguing uncertainty. We do know that both children go on to live interesting lives. Catherine becomes a lady in waiting. Henry Carey becomes Baron Hunsdon and is treated very well under Queen Elizabeth I, who could be his cousin or half-sister. Mary's children stay close to the crown, even if their mother does not. While and is growing stronger, Mary is becoming quieter. Her husband, William Carey, died from sweating sickness, a disease that caused excessive sweating, in 1528. Mary is now a widow, with 2 children and very little money. She has to ask her powerful family for help. And, who hasn't yet become queen, but is still Henry's favorite, agrees to support her. But there's tension now, and it's obvious. Mary has become a nuisance. She's no longer useful. Even worse, she's unpredictable. Then she does something that, in the eyes of the Tudor, is completely unacceptable. She falls in love with a soldier called William Stafford. He is not a nobleman or a diplomat, and he has no political value. Mary also secretly marries him. When the Binns find out, they're furious. And who is soon going to be queen is humiliated. The family stops communicating with Mary. She has been sent away from the court. He was sent away, not because of a scandal. She's already been a royal mistress, but for marrying without permission, without planning, and without getting anything out of it. It's one of the most quietly radical acts in Tudor history. Mary Boleyn, once the mistress of the most powerful man in the land, gives it all up to marry for love and pays for it. She lives out the rest of her days in relative obscurity, far from the intrigues of court and far from her sister's rise and eventual fall. There's something haunting about that. When and is imprisoned in the Tower, waiting to be executed, there is no record of Mary visiting her. Maybe she couldn't, maybe she would. Maybe she had seen enough of the crown's poison to know when to stay away. But in the end, Mary stays strong and doesn't speak up. She died in 1543, when she was about 43 years old. There will be no big funeral or monuments, just a small entry in the family records. And her blood is still flowing through the veins of the powerful. Her children grow up, flourish, and become a regular part of the Elizabethan court. Here's a fun little twist for you. In the 20th century, historians confirmed that Mary Boleyn was an ancestor of both Winston Churchill and Princess Diana. This means that the modern British royal family descends from the Boleyn family that was forgotten, not Mary. You let that settle because it's perfect, right? The quiet one, the one who is not involved, the other one. She lives longer than them all, not because of any drama, but because of the legacy she leaves behind. And is like a comet, she burns brightly and then disappears. Mary, on the other hand, moves gently through the generations. You can see her influence, even though she is not obvious. And that's the danger of underestimating the shadows. Sometimes they last longer than the flame. You stand in the throne room, just off to the side, breathing heavily. Don't make eye contact. But tonight, everyone is looking at each other. The air feels electric. It's more than just a ceremony or a show, because Boleyn is no longer the king's mistress. She's the best, and that changes everything. You've seen mistresses before, of course. Nice, smart, only for a short time. Their power was always limited, and was different. She did things no other mistress had done before. She changed the job description. She turned flirting into a war, seduction into change, and desire into plan. She didn't just take the queen's place. She took them by force, broke the heels off, and strode down the aisle of history, wearing them like weapons. It's 1533, and you're in the middle of Henry VIII body. Everything is shaking. The king has refused to follow the Pope's orders. England is no longer under the rule of Rome, and Anne, who is pregnant and glowing in her royal robes, is proudly shown through the streets of London as the new queen. The crowds are split. Some people cheer because they are loyal or because they are afraid of being noticed if they don't cheer. Others look angrily, whispering words like witchu or usurper. And here's all. She smiles, but let's go back a bit because the rise is just as hard as the fall, and was a very good player and had been for 7 years. She refused to sleep with Henry. She gave him her mind, her charm, her company, but not her body. That was her most powerful tool. The king, who was used to getting whatever he wanted straight away, was left pacing, begging, and writing letters full of longing and terrible poetry. He offered her titles. She accepted them at quest out of Pembroke. He promised to marry her. She waited. All this was happening while the wheels of Europe were turning. When he finally left Rome and said he was the head of the Church of England, it wasn't just about love. It was about legacy. He really wanted a son. Catherine of Aragon hadn't given him one, and who was both unspoiled and brilliant, was his next bet. And when she found out she was pregnant before the wedding, it was time to decide. Henry confirmed it. She became queen. Everyone in the kingdom was very excited. But you can feel it, can't you? There's a certain tension in the air, and it's clear that this won't end well, and may have reached the top, but it's a dangerous place. Every step forward is into thin air. She's surrounded by enemies. People who were loyal to Catherine were upset with the noble families, who were jealous of her family's sudden rise. Clerics who think she's doomed England to heresy. Even the people who supported her are watching closely now and thinking, can she do it? And then the baby is born. It's a girl, Elizabeth. You can hear the disappointment before anyone says a word. Henry hides it poorly and tries to smile to show that everything is going to plan. But the court knows what has been gambled. A girl isn't good enough. Not for all this chaos. Not for a broken church and a humiliated queen left alone. But it never gives up. She keeps getting pregnant. Miscarriages happen. One of the children was a boy. Henry starts flirting more openly with Jane Seymour, one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting, on the same day that he loses interest in Anne. You can feel the shift starting again. It's like a gentle wind before a storm. But here's something you might not expect. Anne really believes in what she is doing. She isn't just holding on to her position of power. She's changing what it means to be English. She supports people who want to change things, reads books that are not allowed, and is not afraid to give her opinions to bishops and scholars. She fights for charity and for education. She wants her daughter Elizabeth to be raised to be a ruler, not just a princess. She may have started as a mistress, but she ends up as a visionary. That's why her enemies are so determined to defeat her. The campaign to destroy Anne isn't subtle. It's not very smart. There were rumors of adultery, treason, and even incest, even with her own brother, George. You try not to be sick as you hear the accusations. The same court that once applauded her is now laughing at her downfall. The evidence is not very strong. Testimony is changed, but that doesn't matter. The decision was made before the trial began. You are in the Tower the night before her execution. She prays out loud, her voice steady. She speaks kindly of the king who signed her death warrant. On May 19th, 1536, she climbed the scaffold wearing a deep red dress. Her speech is graceful. She asks for mercy for the king. She kneels. The sword falls to the ground. It's over. But is it? Because Anne's dream doesn't end with her death. Her daughter Elizabeth will one day become queen and be one of the most famous queens in British history. Elizabeth becomes someone who is smart, confident, knowledgeable, and strong. This is very similar to her mother. But scholars are still arguing. Was Anne a victim or a villain? He was either a victim of patriarchy or a cunning manipulator who got too close to the sun. Some people say she was Henry's porn star. Others say she was his. But they do agree on one thing. And Boleyn wasn't just another mistress. She changed the game. She made the job dangerous, ambitious, and potentially deadly. You exhale slowly because this wasn't just court gossip. It was a complete revolution, started by a woman who refused to say no until she finally agreed, which changed the course of history. As you walk back out into the stone corridor, you realize something scary. In Tudor England, the most awful thing that could happen to a woman was not to be queen. It was mistress, just long enough to make the king break the world. You sit down on a chair in the big hall, maybe a little too close to the fire, where your dress starts to smell a bit of smoke and roasted meat. Around you, nobles chat over glasses of wine. And beneath the friendly chatter, there's always one question in the back of everyone's mind. Was it love? When you look at the court of Henry VIII, you might start to wonder whether all this royal romance was real or just a way of surviving with better outfits. Tonight, you're going to explore the truths and lies of courtly love. The poems, the lockets, and the sonnets that were written by candlelight in a room where you weren't supposed to be. At first, it all seems very romantic. But as you look more closely, you realize that nothing at Tudor court is done without thinking carefully about it. And love is no exception. You see it start with young girls who are still children. They are raised to believe that love and marriage are not connected. Love is a luxury, perhaps, but marriage is political. So, true love, which can be confusing and irrational, needs to find another way to express itself. This is where courtly love comes in. It's like a game of pretend, a theater of longing. The woman is placed on a pedestal, out of reach and adored from a distance. The man expresses his love through poetry and other gestures. It sounds romantic in theory, but it's empty in practice and dangerous because eventually someone might cross the line. A glance might last a bit too long. A hand brushes against silk just for a second too long. All of a sudden, it's not a game anymore. Then someone might get pregnant, someone might get fired, or someone might be sent to a quiet manor in the countryside where no one ever sees them again. You watch Henry VIII play this game very easily. He knows how to do the moves. The ring given at a tournament, the private mask where he's dressed as a knight, and the chosen lady is rescued from her seat. It's all a setup. It's planned, but it works. At least for a while, until it doesn't. When the king chooses you, it's not pretend. It's real and it's scary. There are no clear rules for being the king's favorite. One day, you might get a jeweled necklace. The next, your cousin is arrested for blinking too slowly near a Spanish ambassador. The same love that lifts you up can also push you down. But some women still think they can manage it, and they want to. Women who study how to move across a room, just so. Who understands that a thoughtful pause before a curtsy can be more meaningful than 10 kind words. Some people write music, while others sew messages into their sleeves. You once saw a lady arrange her hair into a subtle H-shaped braid at a hunt. It worked. 3 nights later, she was invited to have dinner with the king. And then there are the gifts. Oh, the presents. Do you think it was important that your ex gave you a hoodie? Why not get a castle or a sapphire-encrusted prayer book with your initials etched into the clasp? You touch one that is dusty and forgotten in a side gallery and wonder how many hands it has had before being locked away like a secret. These weren't just tokens of affection. They were markers of possession. You were claimed. If someone else tried to claim you, things could get ugly. Let's talk about the jewelry. The jewelry made by Tudor didn't just shine. It spoke. Lovers would exchange rings with hidden messages, often in Latin or French. There were heart pendants that opened to show small pictures, and lockets that clicked shut with locks shaped like flames. And yes, men wore them too. Sometimes, a lover's picture is hidden under a jacket close to the chest. Sounds romantic, right? You will realize that if your rival wears the same gift, it means that the king has moved on and didn't even bother to get a new one. Now it's just a re-gifted betrayal hanging from your neck. Then there are the letters. If you're lucky enough to find yourself near the king's writing desk after midnight, you might catch him bent over parchment, pen scratching furiously as he tries to find new ways to say, "I'm obsessed with you. Please don't sleep with anyone else." Henry's love letters, too, in Berlin are still around. They're clumsy, desperate, embarrassingly intense, and no one knows how they survived. Someone must have hidden them, kept them, maybe in herself, maybe a maid who understood how important they were. It's strange, but nice to know that even kings can be a bit weird when they're in love. But what about the mistresses themselves? Were they falling in love? Some did. Maybe. Or maybe they thought they had to. Because love in Tudor England isn't just dangerous. It's also money. If the king believes you love him, that's a powerful position to be in. If he thinks you're just there for power or status, that's risky. So the smartest women find a balance. They give just enough to keep his interest, but never enough to lose their balance. There's a sad story behind it all. You watch a young, beautiful woman read a poem that has been left on her bed. It doesn't have a signature, but everyone knows it's from a king. Her cheeks go red. She spends hours fidgeting with the edge of the paper. A week later, she is sent back to her family's estate. Another woman has caught his eye. The poem stays folded in her jewelry box for the rest of her life. And here's the debate that everyone's talking about. Was all this lovey-dovey stuff just a front for something more sinister? Were women forced to take part in these shows? Were they tricked or just forced into doing what they did? Some people say that the whole system was created to hide exploitation in the world of poetry. Others insist that women learned to use the system to their advantage, that they became familiar with its double meanings, its feints, its carefully curated blushing. It's possible that both are true. Maybe it was manipulative, and maybe it was also the only way for women to express power without being punished for it. The rules were never written for them, but some still learned how to win. You sit back in your old chair, forgetting about the wine as another mask starts. People dressed up in fancy clothes dance around the music. It looks like they're playing some kind of game because they're moving around in a way that looks like they know what they are doing. You know better now. Every time the fan moves and every time the koi looks at you, there's a thought behind it. There's a risk and a chance of something happening. Love in the Tudor court is not like the kind of love you see in romantic movies. It's about survival, but it's dressed up in a strange way. You go into the Queen's antechamber, where everything looks fragile. Lace pillows, carved ivory combs, fine Flemish tapestries, but none of it feels safe. Here, among the painted smiles and fancy embroidery, a different language is being spoken. Not Latin or French. It's the quiet way they look at each other and move their hands and bodies. Tonight, you're learning the secret language of royal mistresses. This is the language that they used when words could kill and truth was more dangerous than a dagger. If you're the king's mistress, you won't get a uniform. There's no sash, no crest, and no official announcement, but there are signs. You just have to know where to look. The first thing you notice is the material. It's richer than what most bridesmaids would wear. The colors are bright enough to stand out, but not so bright that they attract too much attention. The dress has gold thread on the sleeves. The French hood was tipped slightly forward to cover the eyes. These are not accidents. There are signs. Mistresses learn to dress not just to look pretty, but to send secret messages. Blue is a color associated with fidelity, but a deeper navy blue could suggest something more private or intimate. Red represents courage, but also passion, blood, and royal favor. Pearls. You should always wear pearls in even numbers. 2 for secrecy, 4 for protection. In Berlin, often wore a necklace with a dangling bee and 3 pearls. The letter was obvious. The number. That's where it gets interesting. Some people say it represented her sister Mary, and the Queen. 3 women who all had the same king. Then you notice the fans. The way a woman holds her phone can say more than what she is saying. A slow wave to the left. Yes, I saw him held tightly closed and lowered. Not here. Not now. They deliberately ignored summons. You catch one girl at a banquet and drop her fan twice in one evening. By morning, she has been moved to a better room in the palace. She never says a word about it. The language of flowers is everywhere. People who are waiting to be seen by the king carry small bunches of herbs and flowers in their gloves, sleeves, or the cover of a prayer book. A rose for love, rosemary for remembrance, lavender for suspicion. You see a young woman reading a bunch of violets and margaritas, and you think it looks like a love letter. To some extent, that's right. Gifts can say a lot. The king can't just say, "You're my mistress," in public. So he gives her more than diamonds or land. He gives her personal tokens. A psalter, a type of religious book, with illuminated, brightly decorated, initials woven into vines, a hand-carved lute, treasure, and a miniature portrait on vellum, parchment, hidden in a locket no bigger than a walnut. Some of these are harmless enough to pass the Queen's lady's inspection. Others are so specific that it makes you wonder how many people really understand what's being exchanged. One unusual thing you might find is a commander ball. A decorative ball, decorated with intricate patterns, is worn on a chain or placed in a girdle with fragrant herbs to protect against illness. But these aren't just for health. Some women carried commanders with secret mottos on the inside. Small prayers or promises, so tiny they can only be read with a glass. One belonging to a mistress not many people know about had the phrase "Timur all my heart" on it. It was never talked about, and no one ever admitted it, but it was given to her daughter when she died. The language used in the Tudor court is more than just a spoken language. It's decorated with embroidery, arranged, positioned, and choreographed. Move your head to one side. Smile slightly while bending down, and gently touch the king's fingers as you pass a goblet. Every movement is important, especially when there are 100 people watching. The queen speaks in code, of course. She has to. If the mistress offers flirtation, the queen offers hearts that are bare, controlled, and regal. The queen might nod less warmly than usual when a lady curtsies, or ask her maid to wear simpler gowns, or ask about her health with a tone so sweet it's almost suspicious. If the queen calls you dear child, you're probably in trouble. Jesters and fools often deliver messages in the background. Their job is to speak the truth in a funny way, which means they can comment on flirting and tension that other people pretend not to notice. You might have heard someone say, it's better to be a king's friend than his enemy, unless they team up. Everyone laughs. No one forgets it. Even dances become a way of expressing ourselves through movement. In the Gallic tradition, the number of times a man invites a woman to dance can indicate his interest. But if a king dances with the same woman 3 times in one night, everyone thinks that he is showing that he likes her. You see it happen once, and the woman is sent back to her father's estate within a week. It was too confident and too fast. Not every mistress learns this language quickly. Some people crash into it like birds hitting stained glass. They smile too brightly, speak too loudly, forget which flower means secrecy and which means betrayal. Women like this are an example of what not to do. Their names were often spoken with warnings. Don't be like her. But the truly skilled ones, the ones who last, they speak in silence. You'll pass them in a hallway and think nothing of it, but then your own luck will start to change. In Arrival, her dress is stained. A promised marriage doesn't happen. A letter never arrives. Power is used without anyone seeing it. That's the main point. Royal mistresses didn't just seduce. They made their intentions clear. They made their way through a court full of dangers and secrets, where even saying the truth could be dangerous. So they made their own language, a silent, essential dialect that was needed. Even hundreds of years later, historians are still trying to understand it. Some experts say that this complicated way of communicating was actually empowering. It was a secret code that allowed women to have some control in a world that did not allow them to be in charge. Others think it was just another way of tricking women into thinking they had a choice. It's both a performance and a rebellion, a trap and an escape, just like always. You are standing in front of a portrait. It is one of those oils paintings where the person in the portrait's eyes seem to follow you. She has no expression, and she is holding her hands in front of her, but you can't help but notice her jewelry. It is made of rubies and pearls, and it is arranged like teardrops. Her fan is open a little, and her eyes are tilted to the left. Her message is very old, but it is still clear. You're not just looking at a woman, you're reading her. You stop at the edge of the privy chamber, your fingers touching the carved wood of the doorway, and you can already feel it. The heat of being close to power. The strange pressure that builds when secrets multiply behind closed doors. This isn't the throne room, the chapel, or the queen's apartments. No, the privy chamber is something else. It's the king's most private room, the place where politics and personal pleasure become so mixed up that you question whether there was ever a clear distinction between them. If you think of court life as a play, then this is the place where the real story happens. Tonight, you're going to walk through the long, dark corridors of scandal. Because in Henry VII court, if there was any talk of sex, gossip, or betrayal, it was all going to this room, which was just beyond the public eye. Only a few people were allowed in there, and not many of them survived. You go in, being careful not to make any noise. The room is quieter than expected, warm from the hearth that is always burning, and full of the smells of wine, sweat, and beeswax. It's not just one room, but a whole suite with a bedchamber, study, dressing room, and more. It's where the king eats, gets dressed, is entertained, flattered, and, of course, seduced. The men who serve him here, the grooms of the stool and the gentlemen of the privy chamber, are more powerful than most lords. They deal with everything from the royal poo to political meetings. It's gross, yes, but it's also intimate. It's not comfortable. You start to notice patterns. Mistresses don't always come through the big halls. They're brought here secretly, often by pretending to be taking them to read or for music lessons. A young woman with a bag of coins, a quiet maid carrying a tray, and a cousin of a nobleman with a clever joke. They aren't officially invited, they're just asked to come. And once they're inside, the rules change. Because here, the king isn't just a ruler. He's a man, tired, impulsive, and in need of distraction. This is where scandal can take root. Take Jane Seymour, for example. Before she became queen, she was just another lady in waiting. But while in Berlin was clever, Jane was even better. You imagine her walking through the privy chamber, looking down and speaking quietly. Henry liked how calm she was after Anne's fiery outbursts. He started giving her gifts, like purses with coins and linen, very soon. She refused them, or at least pretended to. That's what got him interested. The resistance, the idea of being good. Jane wasn't trying to seduce him. She was waiting for him. That's how it looked from the outside. Then there's Catherine Howard and Berlin's cousin, who enters the privy chamber at 17. She is young and full of life. She becomes the king's fifth wife, but before that, she's the court's secret. There are stories going around about moonlight meetings and art galleries, and about flirtations that border on treason. After her death, she was beheaded for adultery. People whispered that it all began here, in these rooms where it was hard to keep an eye on things, and where the consequences felt far away. And it wasn't just mistresses who caused all the drama. The men were just as tangled. Ambassadors listened in. Servants talked about other people. Letters were stolen, forged, and misdelivered. If you say something too loudly, it might start an argument. If someone who shouldn't see it did see it, it could ruin their career. You hear of one brave woman who smiled too brightly at the king during a card game. The next morning, she was accused of impropriety and taken out of court before her family could do anything about it. It's not just about sex, of course. Sometimes it's about power that looks like pleasure. The king's favor is like money, and the privy chamber is like a bank vault. A woman who catches as I might be able to help him make decisions about land grants, pensions, or diplomatic appointments. If a man arranges for his cousin to meet the king, he might get an important job. You begin to understand that court scandals are not just a side effect of power. It's one of the main ingredients. And the letters are important too. They're everywhere. They are hidden in sleeves, tucked into prayer books, or exchanged in books with hollowed-out pages. One story is about a note hidden inside a sugared figure. Another was sewn into the bottom of a dress. You hear about a small portrait of a woman's face that was given to the king. When you open it, you find a lock of hair hidden behind the paint. It's like a secret that's breathing under the surface. There's a famous case that's a bit shocking. One of Henry's brief favorites, whose name has almost been forgotten, was seen laughing behind a curtain in a private chamber with a married member of the court. No one saw what happened, but that didn't matter. A rumor was all it took. Within days, she had gone. Her father was stripped of his lands, and his name was erased from the records, as if he had never existed. Her biggest mistake was forgetting that the privy chamber doesn't forgive carelessness. There's a reason why historians still argue about what really happened behind these walls. Records are patchy. Names get mixed up. Nobody wrote down the date on which the king took a new mistress. It wasn't polite, but there was a message in it. The sudden promotions, the new gowns, the rare jewels that appeared out of nowhere. Scandal doesn't need proof in writing. It leaves its mark on people instead. Some scholars say that the privy chamber was a place where corruption happened, and that power was abused under the excuse of privacy. Others say it was the one place where the king could be human, not just a king stuck in a ritual. But most people agree on one thing. Whatever happened in those rooms had a huge impact on the history of England, more than most council meetings ever did. You are sitting quietly in the corner of this invisible battlefield. The sound of courtiers laughing can be heard down the hall. Every scandal that ever happened here affected families, titles, marriages, and always someone was punished. Usually, the woman who was quieter kept stepping inside. You find her name tucked between the more dramatic entries on a family tree, like a footnote no one expects you to read. Elizabeth, Bessie, and Daryl. There's no portrait, no scandalous poetry, and no famous sister to give her a Netflix adaptation. But don't be fooled. Bessie was actually there in the king's bedchamber. Tonight, you will discover the hidden corners of Tudor's past, where the forgotten mistresses linger like shadows behind the stars of the show. It's easy to forget that Henry VIII entertained more than just flamboyant and dangerous people. There were others, many others. Bessie Daryl was quiet and not very well known. She's like a keyhole to a network of women who were royal mistresses without being famous or infamous. You start with what little we know. Bessie was the daughter of a well-respected Gloucestershire family, the Daryls. He was loyal to the crown and trustworthy, but not ambitious enough to be dangerous. It's likely she came to court when she was about 13 or 14 as part of a noble family. She might have been a companion or maid of honor. She caught the king's attention, but not in a flashy way. And unlike with Anne or Mary, there were no fireworks, no poems written in desperation, no grand banquets with her sitting close to the king. Instead, there was quiet favor, occasional gifts, and time spent with Henry when he wasn't fighting Parliament or dealing with the problems caused by his religious reformation. Maybe that's why it lasted as long as it did, because she didn't ask for more. One of the most interesting things about her was that she gave birth to a son. His name was either Henry Fitz-Edward or Henry Daryl, depending on which local records you believe. Obviously, it's not something that's officially recognized. Henry VIII only recognized one of his children born outside of marriage in public. Henry Fitzroy was the son of Elizabeth Blunt, and the timing, location, and proximity to the king all match up. Although there was no big announcement about Bessie and her son being given an estate, it was a small, well-funded and staffed place, the kind of place where you send people you want to keep comfortable and quiet. You walk through that estate now. The fire is low, the tapestries are faded but still rich. There is a carved cradle in the corner. Bessie raises her child here, not to become a future king, but as a hidden chapter. Sometimes the court sends letters. Sometimes the king sends money. But there are no visits, no royal tutors, just enough attention to suggest a connection and enough distance to deny it. And here's what makes Bessie's story so haunting. She wasn't alone. For every in Berlin who got ahead, there were lots of Bessies. Girls from families with noble backgrounds. She is educated enough to hold a conversation, pretty enough to catch a glance, and clever enough to survive without drawing too much attention. You won't find them in the plays or novels. Their portraits are not signed, if they exist at all, but their influence, however subtle, had an effect on the tone of the court. You find out that Bessie was given a pension for life, which was unusual for a woman who wasn't officially a royal. She wasn't a widow of a great lord. She hadn't served the queen directly, but the money came. Some scholars say it was a payment to keep quiet. Others say it was because they were thankful. You can't help but think it was both. Some people think that there are women like Bessie. One of the Tudor scholars, feeling very respectful, said that the king needed mistresses like her. He really wanted some quiet time because he was feeling stressed due to the behavior of the unpredictable queens and the people who wanted to win. Bessie didn't try to make him feel bad. She didn't demand that he promise her anything. She was just there. It was a kind and caring relationship, which must have felt really good, especially because every interaction could have been dangerous. And her legacy is still barely making a difference. After she died, her son got the estate. He became a gentleman of some importance. There is no scandal or dramatic fall, just a family line that is slowly becoming less popular. She is not mentioned in any of the books that tell the story of Henry's life. Her name doesn't appear in court records after a certain point. It's as if she was gently forgotten, not because she was ashamed, but because it was easier for everyone. Take a moment to think about this, because there's something strange about a woman who was at the center of royal power, gave birth to the king's child, and then disappeared peacefully. There is no tower, no scandal, no tragic poetry, just silence. It makes you wonder how many others there were. Women whose names were never written down, or who had their names deliberately written over, who were paid off, married off, or sent away. Maybe some of them didn't even realize they were part of history. Maybe they thought it was just a short-term thing. They started talking and then kissed. A kiss that turned into a child. He was a child who grew up knowing he had a jawline that was a little too royal. People will never stop debating this. Were women like Bessie victims of a system that was designed to take advantage of them? Or were they clever people who took what they could in a world where there weren't many options? The truth is frustratingly in the middle. Some of them were probably tricked. Others may have had a clear plan, but most people were somewhere between giving up and standing their ground. But tonight, you remember Bessie Darrells. She didn't change the course of English history, but she represents all the women who didn't, but were still there. They watched, waited, loved, and left. They were not forgotten because they were unimportant, but because their stories were not big enough to be included in history books. You walk past her room again on your way back through the long, flickering palace. There's no noise, just a faint smell of rose oil and paper, a cradle, and a name that could be the king's or not. A legacy that was built slowly and peacefully, not quickly and with a lot of noise. You're standing just outside the Queen's chamber now, between two columns carved with vines and roses, watching a line of young women go through like golden ghosts. They're all wearing matching gowns made of pale silk. Their hair is neatly tied under French hoods, and their eyes are looking everywhere but the king. These are the bridesmaids. It is decorative, obedient, and deadly. Tonight, you follow one of them. Not to her embroidery frame or her prayer book, but to the very thin line she walks between doing her queen's service and giving in to her king's temptation. Being a maid of honor isn't just about knowing the rules. It was all about being close to people. In Tudor, England, being close to someone could make you get everything you wanted or take away everything you had. You meet her near the chapel, where she is adjusting her gloves and reciting a psalm from memory. It's not because she's particularly religious, but because there's always someone listening. Her name is Joan, Margaret, or Elizabeth. It doesn't matter. What matters is where she stands. She moves carefully behind the queen, staying close enough for the king to notice when she bends down to pick up a dropped handkerchief or smiles at a compliment that was meant for someone else. Her job is to be useful, invisible, and charming, which is very difficult to do. During the day, she helps dress the queen, helps with letters, and arranges the flowers. At night, she performs in court masques and quietly joins in at feasts, her hand folded neatly, her mouth shut. But beneath the layers of satin and obedience, something changes, because she knows that the king and all the other servants are watching her, just like they are all the other maids of honor. That's how it starts. A quick look across the hall, a shared joke about the music. Then one night, a small note was tucked inside her prayer book. There is no signature, but it is clearly from him. You are excited when you think about the king and her. This is the moment. She could burn it. She could show it to the queen and earn her loyalty forever, or she could read it and reply. People forget that all of this is carefully planned. Becoming a royal mistress is not just a random act of passion. It's a series of small decisions, each one more difficult than the last. The maid of honor knows that once she opens that door, she can never close it again. But she also understands what is waiting for her on the other side. She had a future outside of marriage planned for her by her family when she was 8, and this included jewelry, influence, and land. Maybe even a title, but there are still risks involved. You remember Catherine Howard, who was just a young girl when she caught Henry's attention. It turns out that the Duchess of Norfolk deliberately placed her there as a maid of honor. She was dressed in a sexy way, perfumed, and packaged to appeal to the king's tastes. She rose quickly through the ranks. Her fall was quicker, but this isn't Catherine. Not yet. This is the one before her, or the one after. The girl who manages to hold the king's attention just long enough to be noticed, but not so long that she becomes a threat. It's a perfect example of achieving balance. She makes him laugh. She's just flirtatious enough to keep him interested, but she never oversteps the mark. Not in public, not where the queen can see. Rumors spread quickly and easily. The queen's ladies are whispering. The other maids look at her with narrowed eyes. Some people are jealous. Others are terrified. The closer she gets to the king, the less anonymous she feels. She's not just a maid of honor anymore. She could be a mistress, a rival, or a threat. Then it's time to test it. She has been invited to a private hunt, a small dinner, and a midnight walk in the garden. She never goes alone. That would be wrong. But she does go, and each time she returns with a new ribbon, necklace, or book. The queen doesn't say anything, but her silence is like a scream. It's easy to think of these women as powerless, just doing what the king wants. But you know better now. They're not helpless. They're trying to do things in a system that doesn't let them make decisions for themselves. And so they play the angles. Some flirt to survive, others to get back at someone, and some just because they like him. But most people understand what is really going on. If the king sees you, your life changes. If he touches you, it's never the same again. One small story is particularly memorable. A maid of honor was given a partridge by the king, which had been roasted and glazed with a note hidden inside. She shared it with another maid as a joke, not realizing that a servant had seen the note. Within a week, she was fired. It's not about the note or the partridge, but about laughing too loudly in the wrong place. Another rumor is about a girl who refused the king. Not rudely, just firmly. She was married off within days to a man twice her age and sent away to the north of the country. The message was clear. No one says no to the king without facing consequences. But there were some exceptions. Women who climbed the career ladder from mistress to wife or respectable retirement. Jane Seymour and Berlin were both involved. The line between success and failure was very thin, and still they lined up. The family's ambitions were important. Mothers and aunts gave advice in corners. Fathers wrote letters full of hope. A daughter at court was a chance. If she became a favorite, everything changed. The family gained land, titles, and security. One girl's kindness could improve the lives of 10 generations, or it could destroy them. Historians still can't agree on how to label these women. Were they taken advantage of? Were they involved? Were they both like that? You watch this maid of honor deal with her situation better than anyone thought she could. She isn't just surviving. She's performing, reacting, and manipulating when she can. She knows exactly what she's getting into. But in a world where people's value is based on their family background, at least here, for a moment, she is seen as she truly is. After a while, people stop talking about her in court. A new girl arrives. The king is restless again. Your maid is married, but not poorly or brilliantly. She leaves court with a heavy necklace and a heavy heart. People say her name quietly for a while, and then they stop. But you remember her because she shows you what it really means to be a powerful person. But not a title, but a role, a job, a performance that is very risky. Sometimes the best players were the ones who left the stage early, alive. You are pressed against a cold stone wall in the outer gallery. You are pretending to study a tapestry, but your ears are busy listening. In Tudor England, power didn't just come from the throne or the altar. It exists in whispers, in knowing glances, in a low hum of gossip, passed like secrets beneath veils and behind fans. Tonight, you join the secret group that controls the court. In the world of gossip, a mistress's reputation could be destroyed by just one wrong word. It starts with the ladies in waiting. It's always them. They're the queens of information. It is in the middle of every room. They are trained to look like they're not paying attention, but they are actually absorbing every detail with great precision, like a hawk. They speak in short, incomplete sentences and long, thoughtful pauses. If the king has a new favorite, they know if a rival has been sent away to the countryside for health reasons, they've already guessed the scandal. And they don't keep these details to themselves. They trade them. You watch what happens over a week. A new girl at the royal court received a bracelet. There was no inscription, but the king gave it to her himself. One of the queen's older ladies sees this and mentions it casually while playing cards with a French ambassador's wife. 2 days later, the ambassador told France that the king had changed his mind. By the weekend, the girl's family had received a secret message from an important court official. Would their daughter be happy to get married to someone from another country? The speed is scary, and that's just one rumor. Gossip is very important, and the more you share it, the more it grows. But it's also a weapon. You hear men in fancy clothes talking about a noble woman's reputation before an important vote in parliament. You see it when upper-class women innocently ask why the new maid's family received land last month. You quickly realize that in the Tudor court, information is how wars are won and lost without ever using a sword. The court fools and guesters are especially dangerous. Their job is to speak the truth about things that other people can't. It's filled with rhyme and laughter. One jester tells a riddle about a bird who built a nest too close to the king's window. Everyone laughs. Everyone understands what is going on. A new mistress has moved in too quickly and too boldly, and soon she's gone. No punishment, just replaced. Spies also played their role. This was especially true during the time of Henry's later queens. You hear stories of men being paid to listen to servants or sneak through the corridors pretending to be scribes. One known agent, who was a laundress, kept records of which linens came from which rooms, using perfume residue to trace where certain women had spent the night. It sounds ridiculous until you remember that evidence didn't have to be accurate, just believable. You hear about a small story. One of the servants had a pet bird that would sing a special tune every time a certain lady came into the room. At first, people thought it was charming. Then they realized the bird was always right. It wasn't long before it became clear that the king was interested in that woman. It doesn't matter if the bird was really trained or if the courtier just happened to be in the right place at the right time. The damage was done. Everyone knew about it. When the king lost focus, she did too, and was sent into exile. But not all the gossip was about scandal. Sometimes it was protection that was put in place before something happened. There was a woman who was related to the Seymours. People said she had been in the same carriage as the king. Within hours, she was creating her own story. He was a religious man, humble and loyal to the queen. Before anyone could paint her as ambitious, she made herself seem like she couldn't be touched. She survived. Others weren't so lucky. Even foreign courts played along. Ambassadors often shared information about Henry's love life, hoping to influence political negotiations. A rumored affair could delay a treaty. A woman from a noble family who is confirmed as a mistress might be able to arrange a better marriage for a princess from another country. One Venetian report famously listed the order of the king's passions, ranking women based on how beautiful they were, how good they were, and how many children they had. Imagine a Tinder profile set up by worried diplomats. You will see that rumors about mistresses follow a similar pattern. First, the whisper. He looked at her during dinner, then the confirmation. She wore his colors at the haunt. Then the reaction, gifts, visits, moving into better rooms, and then the backlash. Jealous rivals, furious queens, and relatives who take advantage of situations. Finally, the fate she's gone, or worse, she stays too long. Experts are still discussing the part gossip played in the fall of Anne. Was it really a planned attack by Cromwell and his allies? Or did it start with whispers about flirting that became something more harmful over time? You'll never know for sure, but it's clear that words whispered in the right ears were just as dangerous as swords. There's a darker layer, too. The women involved in these networks weren't just spreading gossip. They were protecting themselves. Information was like armor. If you knew what the king liked, you could flatter him. If you knew which noble was rising, you could attach yourself. If you knew which lady had slipped, you could avoid her fate or seize her spot. One day, you hear a girl laughing too loudly about something she overheard. A chat about a rumor that a duchess had a child out of wedlock. A week later, the brother of the duchess gets a promotion. The girl who laughed was married to a poor businessman and sent to live in Ireland. I understand, but people still gossip. You pass a maid who quietly tells a page, who passes it to a cook, who in turn tells a knight. You see the effect spreading out like a pebble dropped in still water. No one knows where it started. Everyone thinks they know how it ends, but you do. You find yourself in a corridor you were never meant to enter, holding on to a secret. It's probably already old news. You ask yourself, not for the first time, if anyone at court really knows what's real anymore. In the Tudor world, belief is more important than truth. In gossip, people believe gossip and forget it. When you get off the boat, you're in France. It feels soft and strange under your feet. The wind smells different here. There's less of that smoky, English-style bacon and more of those lovely perfumed and spiced aromas. You're not in Henry's court anymore, with its dark shadows and its strange ways. You've gone from one place to another, and now you're in a different kind of danger. Tonight, you will follow the story of a royal mistress abroad. Here, flirtation and diplomacy are closely linked, and the English girls who work here learn their lessons quickly and deeply. Welcome to the French court, where the rules are less strict, but the challenges are just as difficult. The French are great at putting on a show. That makes sense. When you go into the big hall of Francis, you can see the silk banners hanging from the columns. The air is filled with the sounds of the harp and flute. And wherever you look, there are women dressed up in fancy clothes, with makeup on, and looking very aware of how they look. These girls aren't just hoping to catch the king's eye by chance. They're trained. French noblewomen are great at chatting, have a great reputation, and are very clever. Some of the English nannies who come here take notes. You meet Jane Poppener first, a name you've probably never heard. But tonight you'll follow her like a thread through foreign velvet. She arrived at the French court in the late 1490s, originally as a tutor in languages and manners. She was supposed to be respectable and hard to see, and for a while she was, until she wasn't. People know Popport not just for her education, but for her ease with power. She moves easily through the court, catching people's attention with her smile and never staying in one conversation for too long. People soon started saying that she was having an affair with Louis XII. She doesn't have a formal title, and these are rarely given, but there's enough gossip about her to make her from just an ordinary person to a mysterious figure. She walks a tightrope, balancing French popularity with English caution, and she manages to stay in the air longer than anyone expects. And then she disappears. Just like that, he was removed from court, replaced, and sent away. There are no charges and no scandal. He is just gone. When she is not there, it is even more obvious that she is not there. But her influence is still felt, because by the time in Berlin and Mary Berlin come to work for the French court some years later, the rules have changed. The English girls now know that French flirting is just a way to get what you want. They study the smiles. They are very good at dancing. They start using double meanings and learn to read poetry like it's a weapon. When they go back to England, they still feel that passion, and especially likes to learn everything. At the French court, she learns that a woman's true strength lies beyond her physical beauty. It's about mystery, about being clever, and about knowing how to leave just before a man thinks he's won. She sees the French courtesans with their calculated glances and low-cut necklines and realizes that they aren't waiting for permission. They were making space where there was none. She takes that lesson with her when she goes home. But let's go back a step. You are in a carriage. You are traveling through the French countryside. You are with a young English maid. She is working for the Queen. She is 16 years old. Her name isn't important. Let's call her Celeste. She's feeling overwhelmed. She doesn't speak French very well yet. She blushes too easily, but she's already being watched. A courtier has noticed her. A young man asked her to dance. Deep down, Cecily knows that if she plays this well, her family might never worry about money again. The court teaches her to walk more slowly, to let her silence be seen as intelligence, and to dance the painter with a hint of hesitation, so that the men lean in to catch her rhythm. She learns fast, too fast. Within weeks, Cecily is being invited to private dinners. Her name is in letters to England. The ambassador tells her uncle that she's in danger because everyone can see her. But Cecily doesn't stop, because in this world, being seen is how you survive. You find out a small detail about the situation from one of the older ladies at the court. French women sometimes wore rings with small spaces for perfume, not just to hide the smell of the court, but also to attract attention and be attractive. One mistress even dipped her gloves in orange blossom oil before each meeting, so that the king would smell the scent on her fingers. The English girls borrow this trick. The scent of ambition is citrus and rose water. Scholars still can't agree on the answer to this question. Were these young women victims of French decadence, or did they use their foreign education to gain more power than they could ever have back home? Did the French court corrupt them or free them? When in Berlin returns to England after living abroad for years, she has changed a lot. She's cleverer, quieter, and more precise. Her gowns are sleeker, and she speaks in a more sophisticated way. When Henry starts to notice her, it's not because she tries to attract his attention. She doesn't do that. She plays the French game, and she's really good at it. Cecily, however, doesn't make it home. She was married to a minor noble in Gascony, and her name disappears from English records. Her family gets a small amount of money every day. Her younger sister is sent to court instead of her, and so the cycle continues. You start to understand that moving abroad isn't just a change of location. It's a forge. English girls who go to the French court often come back changed, or they don't come back at all. Some of them are broken. Others become women that the English court doesn't quite know how to handle. They are too smooth, too smart, and too aware of their own importance. But when their names appear in letters and memoirs, they are often just mentioned in passing. She worked in another country, a polite way of saying this. Everyone knows what it means. She learned to speak gently, move like smoke, and play a dangerous game with a charming smile. Tonight, you leave France, not wanting to, with the sound of music still in your ears. When you return to England, you feel different. You are changed. You smell different, and you are ready to take on the world. Because while English teachers learned how to survive in the king's court, the best of them learned how to win in France. You can hear it before you see it. The cry of a newborn baby, thin and desperate, echoing off stone walls that were never built for softness. The bedchamber smells of sweat and rose water, and someone has opened a window to let in the fresh spring air, but this doesn't make the room any less sad. You are standing next to a royal mistress who is giving birth. Not a secret or a rumor, but to a child of the king. And now everything changes. Tonight, you will see one of the most shocking and sad moments in the life of a woman in the Tudor court. She will go from being a mistress to becoming the mother of a royal baby. You look down at the woman in bed. Her name is Joan, Marjorie, or Alice. She is young. Her hair is sticking to her forehead, and her hands are still shaking from holding the bed frame as the midwife tells her to push. The child is being washed now in a wooden bowl lined with linen, checked by a nurse, and wrapped too tightly in swaddling. It's a boy or a girl. Either way, the nurse doesn't smile. She doesn't need to. This moment is important, but you can't tell just by looking at them. It's written in bloodlines, in the tension that settles over the house the moment the birth is announced. If it's a boy, people are already talking about what it could mean. If it's a girl, it's still valuable, just not as much. A royal child born outside of marriage can be a good thing and a bad thing. It shows that the king is able to do his job well, but also that he is unfaithful. The mother knows this, lying there in the wet sheets. She's won a strange prize that might ruin her life. You are thinking of Elizabeth Blunt again. She gave birth to Henry Fitzroy in 1519. He is the king's only acknowledged illegitimate son. For a while, Fitzroy was really popular and given a lot of titles, like Duke of Richmond and Lord High Admiral. He had his own court and coat of arms. Some people even whispered that he might be named as the heir. But that future changed. Fitzroy died when he was young, probably from tuberculosis. All that promise gone and blunt. She lived a quiet life afterwards, got married respectably, but was always remembered as the girl who almost changed everything. But most of these mothers don't get titles. People don't remember them. They get sent away. They're paid. Sometimes they get married to someone who is easy to get along with, someone who is willing to take on another man's child in exchange for a pension or a piece of land. Sometimes they just disappear. The king never visits. A wet nurse will take over. The court moves on to the next page. You see a child walking through a garden maze behind a country manor. His eyes are unmistakable, pale blue like the king's, but no one says it. He's being raised by his uncle, even though the servants know better. He'll grow up with careful lies and subtle privileges around him. A tutor paid for by someone who wants to remain anonymous. A set of books with the royal emblem on them. And when he's older, perhaps he'll be invited to the royal court, but never officially, never as a son. Some Tudor scholars believe that Henry VIII had more than a dozen illegitimate children. The names are just guesses. The evidence is not solid, but there is a pattern. Girls who went missing for several months. Boys who joined the royal service even though they had no known parents, but who had the right connections. A gold ring was placed in a cradle, and a royal crest was engraved on it. There's enough smoke to suggest there's a fire, even if no one is going to light the match. People are still arguing about this. Why did Henry only acknowledge Fitzroy? Was it pride or politics? Was Fitzroy the only one he loved enough to claim? Were there others who were kept secret? Maybe they just weren't popular at the time. One woman's child might make Henry too closely connected to an enemy group. Another might challenge the legitimacy of the people who were supposed to inherit. It would be better to just act like they weren't there. And then there's the mother herself standing by the window now, months after the birth. She's pale and thin. She watches the child play in grass. The government is nearby, but it is not close. The mother's gown is expensive but old-fashioned. She hasn't been to court for over a year. The king never replied to her letters. She doesn't say anything. You care about her, but not just because you feel sorry for her. You care about her because you admire her. She knows what this all meant. She knew what might happen when the king first asked her to go to his room. She took the risk anyway. Maybe for her family. Maybe because she had no other option. Maybe it was because she thought he might love her, even if only for a short time. And now she has a child who has a famous vase and a forgotten name. Some of these children do well. They become knights, courtiers, or soldiers. They get married well, or at least well enough. Others go to quiet churches or foreign cities. Their parentage was suggested in old records, but never confirmed. The crown watches from a distance, making sure no one gets too close to the dangerous truth. You see a document once, half burned, with a list of children attached to the court in some financial way. Each one was linked to a woman the king had previously been romantically involved with. The names are vague. The amounts are small, but they're real, and you realize something scary. These children show that history happened in private. The crown was passed not just through marriage and bloodlines, but through passion and secrecy, through the bodies of women who were celebrated, then erased. But some of that survives in their children, like a chin, the fire in the eyes, or the intelligence behind a smile. And while their names may never appear in the official histories, they're still remembered by the people who inherited their beauty, their wit, and their difficult place in the world. So the next time you pass a royal portrait and admire the regal cheekbones or the sly curl of a smile, pause. Ask yourself, is that the face of a queen's child or a mistress's? You're walking across a quiet part of the countryside. Green hills roll gently down the landscape, with hedges full of blackberries. On the horizon, you could just see a big old house. It's peaceful and idyllic. It's the kind of place where history seems like something that happens to other people. But don't get it twisted. This isn't a retreat. It's a reward. Tonight, you will learn about the different areas of Tudor politics, property, titles, and other apologies. Mistresses were given money when they were no longer needed. The crown doesn't send flowers after a breakup. It sends documents that prove someone owns a piece of land. It all starts with a gift. At first, it's not very obvious. A necklace here, a piece of thin, shiny material, a chest of coins delivered without anyone knowing. It's not public knowledge, but some people know about it. It's a way of saying thank you without saying too much. Sometimes it's not even for the mistress herself. It's for her dad, her brother, or her future husband. You can see how this positive feeling spreads to others. Families all benefit when romance is planned well. Look at Elizabeth Blunt again. After her time with Henry and the birth of Fitzroy, she was married off to Gilbert Talboys, a respectable nobleman who suddenly found himself titled as Lord Talboys of Kim. Was he someone who was always looking for a way to get ahead, or was he just in the right place at the right time? Historians still have different opinions, but the facts are clear. He left the deal better off, more respected, and still close to the mother of the king's only known illegitimate son. It's a nice, compact design. Sometimes, the gifts were even more obvious. Manors, farmlands, and annuities. A woman could go from being a maid of honor to being the lady of an estate in a matter of months. One unusual case was that of a mistress who was given a hunting lodge and 20 barrels of wine a year. She lived quietly into her 60s, never remarried, and was known to entertain poets and local nobles with suspiciously good food and a harpist paid by a royal pension. This wasn't just a kind act. It was a tactic. A mistress's role was to provide comfort, distraction, or a stable presence in chaotic times. The king had to stop her talking, make sure she was safe, and keep her away from him, because the last thing a king wants is an affair from the past turning into a problem for him in the future. The pensions were the smartest part. They were paid in 4 installments each year, which was just enough to keep a woman comfortable but not rich enough to be able to rebel. They did have conditions, of course. Don't go back to court. Don't write memoirs. Don't bring up old rumors. In return, you get a roof over your head, some servants, and the promise that your children will marry well, if not too well. You walk through one of these houses now, which has been empty for a long time. The floorboards creak. There's a broken peacock feather fan in a corner. In the study, there's a desk with ink stains from letters that were never sent. You imagine the mistress who lived here, once touched by royal hands, now brushing dust from her sleeves as she watches the seasons pass. The silence must have been very loud. Not all mistresses accepted their golden cages so easily. Some people wanted more land in different counties and jobs for their relatives. One person even asked for and got a lifetime supply of imported oranges, which sounds ridiculous until you realize how expensive they were. That was real power, the ability to make silliness official. There were also attempts to rehabilitate them. Now that your services are no longer needed, the tone goes, how about a respectable marriage? If the woman was young and still thought of as beautiful, a match could be arranged, often with a nobleman who needed the king's favor or a widower who needed to be rewarded for his loyalty. These marriages weren't romantic, but they were contracts, just like everything else in Tudor life. But not all the gifts were enough to make the past disappear. Some mistresses were respected in their local area, but people talked about them in secret in London. Their daughters might be welcomed at court, but people would always look at them strangely. Their sons might join the army or become priests, but they won't rise too high. The ceiling had been set. One sad story is about a woman, whose name we never know, who was given a small piece of land near York. She lived there for many years without getting married and died without anyone to take care of her. In her will, she left everything to a niece, but said that a certain locked trunk should never be opened. Of course, it was open later. Inside, there are dozens of letters, all unsigned, all written in the same hand, probably the king's. Scientists are still not sure if they are real, but the money, the house, the sudden comfort, it all fits the pattern. You realize that these gifts weren't because they liked you. They were ways of controlling what people thought about history. If you give someone enough, you hope they won't ask for more, that they'll become comfortable, settled into a home and a life of controlled luxury. It rarely worked as well as it should. Historians still have different opinions on this. Were these women being paid for emotional trauma, or were they involved in a system of transactions? Was the land given to them as a reward for staying silent, or because they had done a good job? Once again, the line is not clear. Some mistresses may have felt really thankful, others may have felt offended, and some may have used these assets to build small groups of people who had land or money, and to get the people who remembered who paid their debts to support them. You read an inventory list from one woman's estate. It lists dozens of books, foreign silks, and a wine cellar twice the size of her kitchen. She lived well, without getting married, and was sometimes visited by friends from court. After she was fired, she was never seen in public again. But years later, her name was on the guest list for her son's wedding. A ghost in fine velvet. You will see that these mistresses are still around. People just stopped talking about them. The crown gave them homes, comfort, silence. They weren't forgotten, but they were too important to be left behind. You go back into the garden, where the roses have grown over and the fountain is empty. The estate is quiet now, but in the past it was full of noise. It was home to someone who was not very important in history. This person was given the keys to a kingdom, but only for a short time. They were also paid to never talk about it again. You're in the Queen's room now, boy. The silence feels like a scream that has no place to go. The tapestries flutter gently in the breeze, but the breeze doesn't reach the back of the room. She's sitting near the fireplace, with her back straight, and her face looking blank. She has a piece of embroidery in her lap, but the needle hasn't moved for several minutes. And tonight, you're going to stay with her, because if there's one person who always knew when the king had a mistress, it was the queen. So tonight you ask the question no one dared to ask her directly. What should a queen do when her husband wants someone else? You start with Catherine of Aragon, who was a royal, a lady, and a very good Catholic. She was married to Henry VIII for 24 years. During that time, she put up with at least a few mistresses. Elizabeth Blunt, Mary Boleyn, and others whose names are not well known. Catherine never caused a fuss in public. She didn't cry in front of the court or leave church quickly. No, she practiced being a royal. She smiled when she needed to, prayed when she had to, and watched the king become obsessed with her, like a man caught in a fever. But behind the scenes, she fought. She didn't use swords or speeches, but she fought with dignity, and she fought with silence that was so powerful it could draw blood. When Henry asked for his marriage to Anne Boleyn to be canceled so that he could marry Catherine of Aragon, Catherine did not beg. She called herself queen and refused to step aside. She said firmly that she was his wife in front of God and the law. Her refusal made people in the country very angry and split the country in half. Even as in Rose, Catherine remained loyal, not on the throne, but in the hearts of many who still called her the Real Queen. Now you're standing behind in herself. That's right. The woman who was once a mistress is now a queen. She has finally become the leader of her country, but she has to watch as the same thing happens to her. You can feel the irony tighten around her, like the laces of her gown, and had replaced Catherine, and now she was being replaced too. Jane Seymour is young, pale, and quiet, which is not like Anne at all. Henry Nusk, now old and stressed, looks at Jane the same way he once looked at Anne, but now he's got a lot more baggage, and sees it happening. She knows the signs because she was the sign. The secret glances, late-night chats, and sudden changes in the relationship, and then the worst insult of all, the public favoring someone else. When the king started paying attention to a woman in front of the queen, it was no longer just a bit of fun. It was a message, and did not take it quietly. She fought loudly and fiercely. She accused Jane of stealing her husband. She shouted. She even once stole a jewel from Jane in front of the court, and was losing her power. Henry had started to talk about her temper. And you know what happens when a woman's anger is no longer seen as strength, but as evidence of instability? Within months, and would lose not just her husband's love, but her head too. Then there's Jane Seymour, who was quiet and loyal. She was also known for being gentle and kind. She becomes queen, but her story ends almost as soon as it begins. She dies while giving birth to Henry's son, and so she never lives to see him stray. In a cruel twist of fate, she is the only one of his 6 wives he never betrays. But what about the others? And of Cleves, who cleverly avoided conflict. She knew the marriage was a mistake. So when Henry started liking Catherine Howard more and more, and smiled, stepped aside, and got her divorce settlement, palaces, lands, a good pension, and lived comfortably as the king's beloved sister. She lived longer than all of them. Catherine Howard was too young and inexperienced to see it coming. She was Henry's 5th wife and was only about 17 years old. The king was very interested in her, but this didn't last very long. And when his eye began to wander again, she made a big mistake by wandering too. Her own problems, real or imagined, became the fuel for her punishment. Once again, the queen was punished. Catherine Parr was his 6th and last wife. She had been widowed twice before. She was clever for her age and good at her role as a mother. When the king made a mistake, she didn't say anything. She focused on looking after his health, managing his children's education, and getting by, and it worked. She lived longer than him. That was the game now. Don't try to win. Just try to last longer than your opponent. But what do these queens feel? That's what you want to know. We'll never really be sure. The history books don't tell us everything, but we can still make guesses. Feeling lonely, humiliated, and angry, and not being able to say what you're feeling. These weren't just kings cheating on their wives. These were gods chosen by heaven, publicly favoring other women, then expecting the queens to smile through it. The queens smiled, but then they stopped smiling. Some people were patient and waited for the right moment, while others didn't have that opportunity. But everyone knew what it meant when the king started looking elsewhere. If you have less power, you have less influence and fewer allies. Your enemies became more confident. Your letters went unanswered. Your position, which was once very important, started to become less stable. It's not because of your choices, but because of his mood. People are still arguing about this in academic circles. Should we feel sorry for these queens or be impressed by them? Were they trapped, and were they victims of a cruel system? Or survivors who were unfeeling and could negotiate well even when it was very difficult? Maybe both. Maybe not. Maybe the truth is somewhere between Catherine of Aragon praying on her own in her room and Berlin holding on to Henry's sleeve at their last meal together. You walk past their portraits now, which are hung side by side in a dusty gallery. They look calm and relaxed, but their eyes reveal a different story. You can see it in the way their mouth is tight, the jewelry they've chosen, and the way their head is tilted slightly to the side, as if they're saying, "I see everything, but I'm pretending I don't." That's the real language of queens. And here's the ironic part that you'll remember even after you've left the chamber. History remembers mistresses as temptresses, home wreckers, and pawns. But it was the queens who had to deal with it all in public, and they did it with such style that they could have drawn blood. They were crowned, yes, but they were also caged. Some cages are made with velvet and gold. You are kneeling on a cold stone floor in a candlelit chapel that smells of old wood, beeswax, and something even older. It might be because you feel guilty or because you remember something. A royal mistress sits beside you, her dress falling to the floor, her fingers tightly laced together in her lap. She doesn't look up at the altar. She is looking at the candle. Tonight, you sit with her and think about the problems that come when something bad happens in a place that is supposed to be safe and holy. Because in a world ruled by men, where lust and laws were written in Latin, even the king's mistress had to answer to someone, and that someone often wore robes, carried incense, and spoke in a way that meant they were forgiving. Religion was a big part of life in Tudor England. It wasn't just something I had to do on a Sunday. It was the air everyone breathed. Every meal started with a prayer. Every birth and death was celebrated at a church. For a mistress, especially one who was not married, not pure, and not forgiven by society, the weight of sin was more than just a metaphor. It felt like pressure from every look from a priest, every whisper about a shrine, and every reminder that the king's love wasn't considered holy. And so she admits it, but not in public. A confession for a royal mistress was usually a private affair. It was kept secret and done quietly. It wasn't because her sins were rare, but because they were known. Everyone already suspected something. Saying it out loud made all the difference. "I have slept with the king," she might tell her priest in secret, "and I was not his wife." And what is he supposed to say to that? It depended on the priest. Some were about politics. They nodded gravely, told her off, and passed the information on to higher clergy or sometimes to the king himself. Others were kind. They reminded her that even Mary Magdalene found grace, and that when you repent, God can still forgive you. But the best and rarest simply listened. Forgiveness can be hard when you feel like you have to forgive in order to survive. You think of in Berlin, who was extremely religious. She always carried a small book of prayers with her and would quote from it when she felt the need. Her faith wasn't just for show. It was personal, intense, and challenging. But she did something wrong by the standards of the time. She fell into lust and ambition and married a man who was not free to marry. Did she confess before the sword fell? Yes, it seems she did. Her final words showed that she accepted her religion. Whether she felt forgiven was a question only the walls of the tower could answer. But not all mistresses became queens. Most of them were in a kind of in-between state, being half good and half bad, depending on which bishop you asked. After her affair, Elizabeth Blunt was known to be very religious. She gave money to local churches to help build a small chapel near her estate. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was gratitude. Maybe she just knew that in Tudor England, you couldn't just stop sinning and not build a church. You hear a story that is only mentioned in passing in the records of a woman who regularly confessed to her priest that she was seeing someone. The priest begged her to stop coming to see him. "Your soul is not damned," he reportedly said, "but your mind insists on living in the fire." She left behind a rosary made from ivory. The beads had been worn down from years of counting. No one knows her name, but they know she cried a lot. The Reformation made things more complicated. Suddenly, the lines are even more blurred. The king is the head of the church now. What happens if you break the rules set by a man who writes them? If Henry VIII says his mistress is pure enough to become queen, who can argue? Confession changes. Penance becomes political. The old priests have been replaced. The Latin is replaced with English. And the women, they adapt. One mistress asked her priest whether it was worse to refuse the king or to surrender to him. I'm not joking. It was a serious question. Say no, and you insult God's chosen people. Say yes, and you break the seventh commandment. There was no right answer, just consequences. You imagine a woman kneeling before the altar after the king has left, her body still showing the effects of his love, and her heart torn between what she was told was holy and what she had to do to survive. Does she feel dirty, like she can be redeemed, or like she has power? But some historians say that the church made women feel ashamed. Others think that confession was one of the only ways these women could take back control by naming their sins in the way they wanted to. The chapel is silent. There's something very dramatic about all of this. Mistresses don't wear crowns, but they do wear guilt like one. They know what it means to be judged by other women, priests, and history, even if they don't believe in hell. People pray for different reasons. Some do it just because they're used to it. Others are desperate, and some are desperate because if you've lost favor with the king, there's only one more person you can pray to. You watch as the mistress next to you lights a final candle and stands up. Her face looks calm and emotionless. She returns to the world knowing that forgiveness might be real or might be a story she tells herself to help her sleep at night. She doesn't have any other money. You stay in the pews for a little bit longer. The wind makes the stained glass rattle a little. You understand that in the big competition for power and pleasure, it wasn't always the king who got to decide. Sometimes it was God. You are alone in a room lit by candlelight. You are looking at old parchment paper. Little bits of dust are dancing in the air. The room smells of old vellum and lavender oil. Someone tried to preserve these things once. You shouldn't be here, and you shouldn't be touching this. A letter folded 3 times. It is sealed with a faint imprint of a signet ring that has been worn over time. It's almost as if it was a secret that never really came to light. Tonight, you're reading words that weren't meant to last. The pieces of longing, power, and begging that somehow didn't get burned. Tonight is about letters that shouldn't exist. Here's a fact that nobody likes to admit. The most dangerous object in the Tudor wasn't a dagger or a cup of poison wine. It was a letter that had been written quickly, hidden in a glove, and folded into the spine of a prayer book. When you're a royal mistress, Those letters are important because they let you know what's going on and also give you some information. You start with Henry VIII's famous letters to Anne Boleyn. 17 of them survive. 17 glimpses into the king's troubled heart. He writes to her as if he's a lovesick teenager, calling her his mistress and friend, worrying about her not being there, and praising her in a very clumsy way. He signs one with the words, "Written by your loyal servant and lover." You might feel a bit dizzy or embarrassed, but what's even more amazing is that they're still around. And didn't give them back. She kept them, or someone else did. Maybe it was to gain power. Maybe it was to remember. Maybe it was because she liked being able to hold the king's heart in her hand on paper with his ink still fresh. In the end, they were stolen by someone she will never know. And now they're stuck in the Vatican, which seems like a bit of poetic justice for the man who took England away from the Pope just to marry the woman who used to read them. Then there are the hidden drafts, letters never sent, or perhaps copies in someone's hand to avoid discovery. You hold one now, and signed, possibly by Jane Seymour before she became queen. The handwriting is neat and careful. Words are soft but firm. She refuses a gift. "I won't take what I'm not entitled to." It says it could be fake. It could be a work of fiction, but it feels real. And in a court where emotions led to people's deaths, that's saying something. There's a love poem written on the back of a lute chord chart, but it's almost illegible. It is addressed to the lady in blue and signed with just an initial. Some people say it was written for Mary Shelton, who was another of Henry's brief favorites. Others say it's not important, just a type of court poetry. But again, nothing at court was ever straightforward. You find a piece of a much sadder kind. We found a note in one of our books. It was wet, maybe from tears or rain. It says, "He promised to come, but the candles had burned down and only the wind was there." It isn't signed. You'll never know if it was written by a mistress, a lady in waiting, or someone with more poetry than sense, but it stayed hidden between those pages for centuries. And that makes it matter. Historians often disagree about these things. Are the surviving letters real, or have they been faked? Are they romantic or political? Can you trust a word when the writer had every reason to lie, flatter, or seduce? Some people think that Henry's letters to and show true feelings. Others say it was all a trick, part of a carefully planned campaign to get her to do what they wanted. The truth is tricky to find, hidden in the details. And then there are the letters that should exist, but don't. Where are the replies? Anne's letters to Henry. She must have written them. What happened to those? Were they burned, stolen, hidden by a jealous queen, or a shrewd servant who knew better than to get caught with such a valuable item? When they're not there, they are still present. It makes the story even more interesting. You might think it's just a made-up story, but some people believe that Anne Boleyn wrote a final letter to Henry from the Tower of the Night before she was killed. In it, she apparently asks for justice, says she is innocent, and signs off as your most loyal wife and wronged queen. Some people say it was intercepted and never delivered. Others say it's a fake made long after her death to make people feel sorry for her. But wouldn't it be great to think that her final words were written, not shouted from scaffold? You go back to the room and find one last relic. A letter written not to a king, but about one. A mistress who doesn't give her name talks about life after being in a relationship. She writes that she feels like she lives on the edge of a great fire, no longer inside its warmth, but still too close to sleep. That line stays with you because that's what these letters are. It is warm, it is warning you, and it makes you wakeful. You realize something else as you sit there surrounded by the ghosts of ink and parchment. These women weren't supposed to have a voice, not officially. Their words weren't written down in Parliament or carved into monuments, but they wrote them anyway. They did it in secret, in stolen moments, in borrowed books, and behind fans, and under candlelight. They wrote themselves into history not through speeches, but through love letters and lost notes hidden in a world that tried to forget them. Even hundreds of years later, their voices can still be heard, even if they are quiet. You are standing in the border area between two worlds in a grand hallway, with soft velvet everywhere. This hallway is in a place that is not quite English and not entirely French. A place brought together by friendly talks and a shared wish. Tonight, you'll be on the lookout for Jane Popincourt, one of the more mysterious mistresses, or was she just a fleeting presence on the Tudor stage? She was a woman who lived in different courts and cultures and was loyal and longing, but she was always a bit mysterious. Her story lets you get a glimpse of the strange world of people who lived without an identity. People who make friends with others without thinking about national borders, and people who fall in love without being sure about the future. Jane is already at court when you first see her. She is calm and confident, wearing a silk gown that is not traditional for England. That's your first clue. She's French, or at least raised there, and her style is very polished and sensuous. She came to England to teach the daughters of Henry VIII French, not to be his lover. She was supposed to be quiet, polite, and hard to see. But like most women who are not well known, she was interesting. The first rumors start in France, not in the English court. Some say Jane was the lover of the French king, or maybe of one of his servants, but this depends on how much wine the storytellers had drunk. She was elegant and mysterious, not beautiful in the obvious way that Tudor mistresses were often described, but sophisticated in a way that made English nobles look interested and watch her closely. When she went back to England, she spoke both of the court languages like someone who was born there. She had learned a lot of dangerous things, not just about beauty and knowledge. Jane understood the politics of the situation. She knew which French prince liked war and which liked wine. She knew what it was like to wear French perfume and to be suspected of being English. Henry VIII noticed her not because she was young, but because she was clever. When they started flirting, he was still the charming young prince, not yet filled with power and paranoia. Jane had experience. The chance to experience a court full of 15-year-olds and girls who say they're virgins was too good to miss. But was she really his mistress? That's what historians are still trying to figure out. The record is very unclear. One account says she was very popular with the king. Another says she speaks gently and is full of life. Neither of them says for sure what kind of relationship she had with Henry. But we do know that she stayed longer than most women who weren't important. She stayed at the royal court. She moved in circles so that she could overhear everything. She wasn't dismissed until suddenly she was. The story goes that Jane was going to marry a Frenchman named Seigneur Dower, but the marriage didn't work out. This might have been because of the scandal surrounding her reputation, or maybe she had just got too comfortable in England. In the end, she was asked to leave without making a fuss. There was no trial and no tower, just a polite disappearance. This is very interesting. She wasn't strong enough to be dangerous, but she wasn't weak either. You imagine her getting her gowns ready, folding her letters, and wrapping up the gold chain that a courtier gave her as a gift. He had tried to impress her with a poem. She doesn't have any confirmed children. She never owned land or had a famous death, but she still made an impact. Some people think that Jane was a secret informant for the French during her time in Henry's court. She told Francis I about some gossip, speaking softly and kindly. There's no proof, but you can see how the idea developed. A woman who spoke 2 languages and was welcomed into the private rooms of nobles, possibly even the king himself. It wouldn't take much to put a word in the wrong ear or a letter in the wrong pouch. Others say she was just a pawn, tolerated for a while, then got rid of when her value dropped. Some people say she was a test case. She was able to travel between different cultures and was not clearly defined. This helped her to gain power in a world that was not often kind to women. Jane Popincourt was not a mistress, but she was still living on the edge of legitimacy. The lines between diplomacy and desire were blurred for her. Her story is very rare in Tudor Mistresses, a woman whose power wasn't just in her body, but also in her access to things. She wasn't born into a rich family. She didn't have a child with the king. She didn't even get a dramatic fall. And yet, she was there teaching, listening, possibly loving, and certainly scheming. She reminds you that being influential doesn't always mean being controversial. Sometimes it comes from just being there long enough to see everything. You walk through the royal apartments and imagine her ghost still moving between rooms, stopping beside the queen's embroidery, laughing gently at a French joke, and thinking about what the political situation is like today. People don't remember her like they remember the Boleyns or the Seymours. She hasn't had any scandals that have gone down in history, but she was one of the first women in Henry's circle to teach the court that being smart could be tempting, that knowledge could be used like a fan, moving smoothly and evenly when opened just right. Maybe that's why she matters. I was impressed by what she did, but even more so by what she showed was possible. You leave the corridor behind, her name still in your mind. Jane Popincourt. She was neither queen nor mistress, but a woman who walked the halls of kings and left footprints where no one expected to find them. And sometimes that's enough. You're standing in a stone room that smells of damp wool and something cold. Maybe it's fear or the feeling of having kept too many secrets. The guards move uncomfortably. A clerk quickly writes something down and doesn't look at anyone. In the middle of the room, a woman shakes. She is not shaking with shame or anger. She is shaking because she has realized that she made a big mistake. She made a mistake by loving the king. It was letting him stop. Tonight, you're seeing how passion can be turned into politics. This is the section that nobody wants to believe, but everyone needs to hear. The punishment for loving the king. You thought being a royal mistress would make you happy and give you status. You've seen the fancy clothes, jewelry, and big houses, as well as the small, simple pensions. But those are for the lucky ones, the ones who knew when to step back or who were protected by marriage or secrecy. Not every woman was able to leave. Some of them fell over, and when they fell, it wasn't because of any scandal. It was a choice between prison, disgrace, or death. Start with in Berlin, the star who rose from mistress to queen. As the story goes, her head was cut off in one go. You've heard about the big stories, cheating on a husband or wife, having sex with a family member, and betraying your country. But look more closely. The truth is simple. She was no longer useful. She didn't have any surviving sons, and she wasn't prepared to just fade away. Jane Seymour's arrival was a turning point for Anne. She appeared shy and ready to have children, which made it clear what would happen next. The charges were based on dust and envy. Accused of sleeping with lots of men, including her own brother, and was put on trial and found guilty in a show of justice so fake that you can still hear it today. She was almost certainly not guilty, but I'll give you a spoiler. The only thing she did wrong was what so many other unfaithful women do. She became a political threat. This is when loving the king becomes dangerous. Catherine Howard is next. Young, with only basic education, and a prostitute who was given to the king by the Duke of Norfolk and his family, who were very ambitious. She became queen very quickly, so she probably didn't have time to understand the danger she was in. When people started talking about her past, old relationships, a music teacher, and a boy with a quick smile came to light. This was the beginning of the end for her. But it wasn't just her past that doomed her. It was the suggestion of present betrayal. A letter was found, and a meeting was said to have happened. Her old boyfriend, Thomas Culpeper, was arrested, tortured and forced to confess the truth? We'll never know. Catherine was executed for treason. She was accused of betraying a man whose love for her was deadly and overwhelming. But adultery and treason weren't always necessary. Some women suffered because people remembered them too well. There's the case of Elizabeth Bessie Holland, one of Catherine Howard's helpers and possibly a former lover of Henry's. She was arrested for helping Catherine have secret meetings. Was she loyal, naive, or trying to protect a friend? It didn't matter. She was questioned, made to feel ashamed, and put in prison for a while. We don't know what happened to her after that. The punishment wasn't always death. Sometimes it was slower. A fall from grace that was open to the public, a ruined reputation, families losing their titles and land. A daughter who everyone used to love came back to her childhood home like a scandal wrapped in silk. You read about a woman whose name is hidden by the person writing the story, who refused the king's advances. She wasn't punished in public, of course, but her father lost his job in the court because her brother's wedding was canceled. A subtle, poisonous revenge. There's a story going around, some of which is true and some of which is not, about a woman who tried to kill herself after the king rejected her. We don't know why she fell. Maybe it was true, or maybe it was just a rumor. But the result was obvious. She was fired, humiliated, and sent to a convent. The royal pension arrived, but she never spent it. She died within the year, and not many people went to her funeral. Her name is written on a stone that no one visits now. So why did these punishments happen? Was it about what is right and wrong? Of course not. Kings could do wrong and get away with it. The court could ignore all kinds of indecency so long as it was discreet, temporary, and not harmful to politics. But once a mistress caused trouble, became too powerful, too bold, too well known, the crown had to get rid of her. In Tudor politics, there was nothing more dangerous than a woman the king had once loved very much. That kind of affection left fingerprints on everything. This meant that policies were changed, favors were granted, families were raised in status. And once the king moved on, all those ties became a problem. The woman at the center of it all was no longer needed. Her enemies had circled her, and her allies had evaporated. Scientists are still discussing what these punishments were like. Were they working together, or did they just lose their power when the royal family stopped supporting them? Some people say the women were to blame for what happened to them. They say the women were too proud, too reckless, and too involved in things that were too important for them. Others say they were just scapegoats, victims of a court that built women up for sport, then tore them down for survival. You want to know the truth? The truth is, the system was built to break women, especially women who made the mistake of being visible, desirable, and ambitious, especially mistresses. You step back now. You leave the interrogation room, the chapel where confessions were made but not heard, and the cell where a letter was never delivered. And you remember this. Not every royal mistress lived out her final days in a country house filled with roses and gold-rimmed goblets. Some people ended their lives in cold rooms, surrounded by silence, asking themselves what their love was really worth and what it cost. You're standing in the garden now, near a broken sundial that no one complains about anymore. The sun is going down behind the orchard, and everyone is silent. There will be no parties, no masks, and no gossip, because tonight the king is bored, and that the slow, soft death of a royal mistress's power is more than scandal, treason, or ambition. Tonight, you are left in the uncomfortable silence that follows obsession. The music will stop when the king gets bored, but you'll still be dancing. At first, the change is so small you almost don't notice it. The dinner goes by without anyone looking at it. A letter is left unanswered. The chamberlain doesn't include your name on the list for the hunting party. You're still at court, still wearing fancy clothes, still sitting near the queen, and still being flattered by people who used to bow down to you. But the warmth is gone. The way the king spoke, with a slight change in his voice, and how he used to listen to you more closely. It's gone. Oh, he leans over to talk to someone else. You've seen it happen before to other women. You even talked about it behind his back. Lady Alice, poor thing. One moment she's riding next to him. Next, she is sent to Wiltshire with a basket of pears and a polite note. But now it's you, and it doesn't feel like gossip. It feels like you're standing in a room that was once full of candles, and someone has gently blown them all out. The court is good at spotting these things. People used to be nice to you. They flattered you, gave you presents, and offered you help without making it obvious. Now you're met with a different kind of politeness. The ones who don't look you in the eye. We should catch up later. That smile of his never turns into a conversation. The younger ladies start standing a little closer to the king. They laugh even louder. One of them wears your color to a party. Bold. Even the queen seems to notice. Her reaction depends on who she is at the time. If it's Anne, she feels happy. If it's Jane, maybe a little sympathy. Catherine P., she probably pies you. But they all understand the game. The mistress is only dangerous when she's adored. When she's not, she's just awkward. So what happens next? It depends on how you play it. Some women hold on tightly. They write letters. They cry, plead with the king's advisors, write letters, and beg for another meeting with the king. It never ends well. The desperation is too obvious. It confirms what everyone already suspected. You missed your chance. Others try to change direction. They join forces with another nobleman, get married quickly, say yes to a political match, and act like it was their idea all along. Some of them do succeed. They give themselves new identities as wives, landowners, and supporters of the arts. One of her past lovers builds a school in her name. Another goes to a nunnery, which she may have chosen herself. Probably not, but the most interesting ones go away when they want to. They see the signs and bow out gracefully. They don't make a big scene or write a farewell letter. They just leave without making a fuss. It's the most elegant way to leave, and it's rare because it takes a kind of strength to leave before the music stops. You hear about one woman, a mistress, who realized the king was no longer paying attention. She asked to go back to her family's estate to get better from a cough. She left behind only a prayer book and a pair of gloves with the royal crest on them. There were no letters or public statements. Within a year, she was married to a rich baron and was having his baby. Some say the king wrote to her once more. Others say he forgot her name. Either version might be true. The king is bored, and this is more dangerous than if he is angry. At least when he's angry, he remembers you. When he's bored, you disappear. You become something he used to enjoy. It's like a tapestry that no longer matches the room. And once he forgets, the court forgets even faster. There's a funny story about a mistress who tried to get things back on track by writing a song, playing the flute, singing, and using her voice. She had it performed at court by a group of minstrels during a feast. The lyrics were too obvious. The king hardly looked up from his plate. She was sent to the country within the week. The song is kept in a dusty archive. No one plays it anymore. Historians can't agree on what happened to these women. Were they just unlucky men? Or were they caught up in a system that only valued women when they were young, useful, or pregnant? Some people say that they were still powerful even when they were weak. Others say that they were just illusions of agency that were allowed to exist only while they were entertaining. You have now seen both sides. The strength, the danger, the speed, the sadness when the king looks away. And then there's the loneliness. That might be the worst part. After the excitement, the rush, and the attention, feeling alone can be really tough. Your old friends are starting to move on. The nobles stop sending wine. You hear about the court's latest gossip from a letter, not a conversation. You're still wearing the dress he liked, but he's already complimented someone else's. In the end, the court stops talking about you. In a world where people used to speak about you with awe or envy, it's hard to deal with the silence. But it's not forever. Here's the secret no one mentions. The king is always getting bored with his mistresses, wives, and policies. The only question is how you survive the silence. Some do, some don't. You still have time to rewrite the ending because you're still standing. You're watching a woman brushing her hair in the dark. She is doing 100 strokes slowly and evenly, trying to keep the same rhythm as she breathes. The court is asleep or pretending to be, but she's not. Tonight, she's thinking about her job, not embroidery or going to the queen, not writing a complimenting poem or practicing a dance. Her actual job, the most dangerous, most unacknowledged, most quietly powerful position at the Tudor court, is that of royal mistress. And don't be fooled, it's a real job. It comes with perks, but also scrutiny, isolation, and a daily risk of ruin. Welcome to the court's most dangerous position. You've seen the jewelry, the gowns, and the gifts. It looks perfect. It started out as something unknown, but now it's something very special. It was loved by a king and made the other people in the court jealous. But look more closely. Under the pearls, her hands are warm. She feels worried and nervous. Every word she speaks has been practiced. Every movement is thought about. She's always being watched. People don't love her. They're just waiting for her to make a mistake. Being the king's mistress isn't about being beautiful. That's the trick. The job requires something more. You need to have a good understanding of politics, know how to make decisions, be patient, and most importantly, be able to control yourself. Say too much and you become a threat. Say too little and people will forget you. The sweet spot is narrow and it's easy to miss it. You get into her shoes. You're given new gowns, yes, but only so people can pick you apart more precisely. You go to parties where everyone is happy, but no one trusts you. You walk through gardens and see hidden messages being passed 2 paces behind you. You wake up wondering if today is the day the king stops calling or even the day he decides you're embarrassing. You can't even trust what you see in the mirror. A mirror will tell you you're still beautiful and still wanted, but the gossip might say otherwise. And gossip is what shapes reality in court. You hear that your laughter is too loud, that the queen's cousin thinks you're ambitious, that your latest poem was not very well received. Do you deny it? Do you just shrug it off? Do you get your own back? Each choice is like a move in a game of chess. You can't afford to make mistakes, and you don't have any allies. Not really. The queen either hates you or is cruel to you, and which one is worse is a question you will have to answer. The women waiting for you see you as someone to be used or as an example of what not to do. The men who once flirted with you now keep their distance, afraid of being accused of treason just because they know you. Even your own family might start trying to find someone to replace you if they think you're losing your influence. Loyalty is like money, and you're using it up quickly. You try to keep yourself grounded. Maybe you write letters that are clever and flirtatious, but not too specific that they could be read out loud without causing any problems. Maybe you identify with a particular group. Maybe you support poets, sponsor masks, or whisper to secretaries. But there's always a risk, because what happens if the next woman is younger or more attractive or has a family member on the Privy Council? There's a small story about a mistress who survived at court for 5 years by pretending to be a very religious woman. Most serious historians do not know about this. She went to church every day and didn't eat, fasted in public. She even insisted on sleeping alone, saying she and the king only met to discuss religion. Was it true? It probably wasn't, but it was very clever. Who could say a woman who is too religious to make plans is not ambitious? But others weren't so careful. One mistress tried to use her power to change a marriage contract for her brother. It didn't work. The king heard about it, and within days, her apartments were reassigned. Another woman accepted a necklace from a foreign diplomat. The necklace was a trap, proof of outside influence. She was sent to a convent in the north. She lasted 2 winters. You can see how close together the margins are. One wrong move, one rude joke, one honest opinion set too close to the wrong ear. That's all it takes. Nobody will stand up for you because nobody ever says that you had power in the first place. Your role isn't officially recognized. You're not on the council. You are not in an official position. Even when decisions are made in private, they still affect you. They are filtered through things like kisses, compliments, and laughter at the right moment. Some people say that royal mistresses were just used. Others say they were queens without crowns. The truth is that they were both and neither. They were survivors in a court where women were meant to be eaten and then forgotten. Their power was only temporary. The people in charge only let you play for a bit longer if you play well. You can hear the woman brushing her hair. She let out a quiet sigh. She knows the king still loves her, but she also knows she's getting older. She has read the poems. She has seen how quickly radiant becomes one in Aorsha's mouth. She's thinking about the future, what she'll do when the summons stop coming. She might accept a marriage, or she might retire to a property and start over. Or she might stay in court long enough to become the former favorite, which would be an even more risky position than being a mistress. She finishes brushing her hair, pins it up, and blows out the candle. The room goes dark. You know that she will sleep lightly. She always does, because being the king's mistress isn't something you are. It's something you do. It's the most dangerous job in the whole court. It's not because it comes with enemies, but because it comes with an expiration date written into every smile, but you can't see it. And when that date arrives, no one will save you. They'll just whisper your name as someone else takes your place. You're in the gardens again, but this time you're not watching the queen or the current favorite. You're watching a woman who's doing something rare. It's so rare, it's almost unbelievable. She's walking away, not from the court, not from disgrace, not from exile. She's walking away from the king himself. Tonight, you will learn about the most important and influential people in the royal family. These people were mistresses who said no. It's almost like a myth, isn't it? The idea that anyone could refuse Henry VIII, a king who was used to people obeying him, worshiping him, and flirting with him in a way that was very polite. But it happened not often, and it definitely had consequences. But there were women who were clever and determined. They looked the power in the face and decided that they would rather have their dignity than sleep with the king. Start with Anne Bassett, a name that is mentioned quite often in this rare category. She was a maid of honor to Queen Jane Seymour and later to Queen Catherine Howard, and caught the king's eye at a time when he was in between favorites. She was young, beautiful, and well-connected, but it never gave in. Henry tried to win her over with gifts, compliments, and attention at parties, but she was always just out of reach. They're always polite, never rude, and they don't always have to be available. She wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what he wanted and how much it would cost. And she wasn't the only one. Margaret Shelton and Boleyn's cousin reportedly caught Henry's attention for a short time during Anne's rule. Some records suggest that Margaret was encouraged by the Boleyn faction to accept his love. It is better to keep an eye on the king within the family than to let him think about political rivals. But even Margaret, it seems, did not go too far. Historians don't agree on whether the relationship involved physical contact, but it's clear that it didn't last. Maybe the king lost interest, or maybe she didn't play the game properly. Now, let's be clear. Saying no to a king didn't always mean slamming a door. It often seemed like she was avoiding something. It was a headache. It was a trip to the countryside that was just in time. The chaperone lingered a little too long. These women became very good at protecting themselves by putting off action. Sometimes the refusal was just political. It could be to protect a family's reputation or to make sure of a better marriage. In other cases, it was personal. These women knew their value and weren't interested in trading it for a brief flash of power that would likely end in disgrace. One small story about the case, which is mostly just talked about in court, is about a woman named Alice Restwald. She wasn't particularly pretty or smart, but Henry liked how clever she was. One evening, during a private meeting, he gave her a brooch and said something that was very clear. Alice smiled, took the brooch, and replied, "I prefer gifts that are not tied to service, Your Grace." She handed it back. He laughed. She was never asked to come back. She also married a rich merchant and lived a very peaceful life. But of course, there was always a risk in saying no. Some of the refusals cost money. One noblewoman's brother lost his job in the king's court just weeks after she refused to be entertained by the king during a hunting trip. Nothing was said directly. There were no formal accusations, just a subtle display of disapproval. In the Tudor court, that was all it took. But these women resisted, not because they didn't know any better, but because they had a plan. They knew that becoming a royal mistress might make them popular for a short time, but also be a constant topic of discussion. If she makes a mistake, says the wrong thing, or says something without meaning to, it could all fall apart. Some people decided to keep their names secret. It would be better to stay away from the court if you don't have a target on your back. It's better to be unremarkable than infamous. It's important to remember that saying no wasn't always seen as a good thing. Sometimes people saw this as arrogance or even rebellion. A woman who turned down a king had to be careful. She had to be graceful enough to avoid causing offense, but also firm enough to avoid being misinterpreted. One small mistake could be very dangerous, but some people still decided to stick to their guns. Even now, scholars are still debating this. Why would a woman refuse the king? Was it about being right or wrong, the best way to win, or being proud of yourself? The answers are different, but it was probably a combination of all those things and something else. A clear understanding of the court's cruel cycle. These women had seen what had happened to yesterday's favorites. The jewelry, the attention, the short-lived thrill of being loved, all of that was gone. They chose the slower, safer path. They chose themselves. It's tempting to see them as noble heroines who never succumb to temptation. But the truth is more complicated. They weren't perfect. They were survivors, realists, women who could read people and understood the situation. And in a court that was very focused on romance and reputation, their refusal was more extreme than any scandalous affair. You walk behind one of them now. You don't know their name, and they're wearing simple clothes and looking calm. She is not remembered in poems or letters. There are no portraits of her smiling next to a royal crest, but she was there. She saw how the game was played and chose not to take part. And in a strange way, she won. The mistresses who said yes were celebrated for a short time, then forgotten. Their names are linked to scandal. Their families are involved in politics, and their reputations are tarnished by their survival. But the people who said no left the stage quietly and without feeling humiliated. You stop at a marble bench where one of them was sitting. She once watched the king walk by, flirted just enough to stay safe, and smiled just enough to be remembered, but never went too far. Historians weren't interested in her story because it wasn't exciting enough. But you can see her more clearly now. Sometimes the boldest choice isn't ambition. Sometimes it's about not being there. You are now in the archives, deep in the basement of the palace, where the air feels damp and old. The air here smells of old ink, candle soot, and old paper that is too fragile to unroll. You're about to read about some of the least known events in history, the ones that aren't included in the popular documentaries or royal family trees. These are the quiet, thoughtful words that speak volumes. Tonight, you're looking into a distorted view of the past. In this view, The royal mistresses of the Tudor era are not shown as seductresses or villains. Instead, they're shown as complex women who were portrayed negatively by men. Welcome to the long-awaited re-examination of their place in the story. Mistresses in the mirror of history. The first thing you notice is how few of them actually survive. Their voices have been replaced by the words of diplomats, chroniclers, and satirists who almost never quoted them. We know very little about these women. Most of what we know comes from the men who judged them or from the rumors spread by their rivals. The court loved a good scandal, and the press knew what would sell. The king's mistress was never allowed to be human. She was either very tempting or very bad. There was no in between. Take Mary Boleyn, for example. People mostly remember her because of her more famous sister. In most records, she's the other Boleyn girl, a minor character with golden hair. She was Henry VII's mistress, and she may have even given him children, but she's just treated as a decoration. Not clever enough, not calculating enough, not important. But if you look more closely, you'll see something different. She was given as a gift to different kings, and she did what was expected of her. In the end, she chose to live a quiet life instead of using her power to gain political advantage. When she married a man much younger and much less well off than her for love, her family rejected her. That was a very brave thing to do. But we remember her only as a small part of a bigger story. Or think about Jane Poppincourt, who you followed a few sections ago. People have called her a courtesan, a diplomat's tool, and even a French distraction. But if you look more closely, you'll see a woman who speaks more than one language. She's in a place where most women weren't even educated, and she's doing well because of her language skills and her smarts. Her story isn't about sex. It's about having a plan. But that story was never written. Even in Boleyn, possibly the most discussed woman in English history, is still a mystery. One side paints her as someone who wants to be the best and used her charm to steal a crown. The other side sees her as a sad person who changed for the worse because she was too smart. But the truth is somewhere in between. She wasn't just a temptress or just a victim. She was the woman who saw how the system worked and dared to become part of it. She was ambitious, but so was Henry. So were Cromwell and Wolsey and almost every man in court. The difference is that and died for hers. Why do historians, especially in the past, often make these women seem like simple cartoon characters? Some people are worried about what this means for our morals. The idea that a woman could use her power to attract people made people feel very uncomfortable. They couldn't admit that mistresses might be intelligent or tactical or even likable. So they were made into warnings. This is what happens when a woman gets too close to power. Even how they are described shows that they are biased. If you read through the records, you'll see the pattern. People either describe mistresses as being very beautiful, but a bit mysterious, or as being quite plain, but a bit mean. It's not about who they were, but how well they fit into the fantasy or the failure. Were they worth the scandal? Were they tempting enough to excuse the king? The focus is never on their thoughts, only their thighs. But if you look closely, you start to understand their truths. A letter signed with a flourish that hints at pride. A donation to a local church that shows true religious devotion, not just a desire to look good. A will that includes servants by name. A rumor that is very shocking when you think about it, and which, when you look at it more closely, tells the story of a woman who has to choose between her own safety and doing the right thing. The mirror slowly clears. Scientists who study history are now trying to change the way we talk about the past. Some feminist scholars, cultural historians, and even a few bold novelists have started asking better questions. It wasn't about who she slept with, but what she wanted. The important thing is not how she fell, but what she was risking. Some people don't like it, of course. The image of the female fatal is hard to erase, but but the archive is changing. The footnotes are getting louder. Some people are even discussing in academic circles whether the word mistress is helpful at all. Is it right? Is it wrong? Should we call them favorites or influencers? Unofficial partners? You smile at the irony. These women were once refused official titles. And even now, hundreds of years later, we're still arguing about what to call them. You look at the documents and think about the people whose lives are described by the labels. Women who laughed, cried, made plans, and prayed. Women who were in love with the king and perhaps even loved him back. Women who made mistakes and tried to put them right. Women who were punished for having the same ambition that won men knighthoods. They weren't just minor characters. They were very important in the drama of the Tudor court. And yes, they have been remembered as shadows until now. You have learned something on this journey. This history is not set in stone. It is set in ink, in margins, in erased names, and half-kept secrets. Sometimes it's written by someone who stops and takes a closer look. You finally got a good look at them. You are at the edge. This was the final period of the Tudor dynasty, when the exciting world of royal politics starts to lose its spark and the passion of the royal family fades. The mistresses you followed are long gone. It might be hidden under marble or lost in the ways of the past. But the way they move through the system, the looks they give each other, the quiet conversations, and the blood and silk arrangements, it's all still there. And now, you finally meet the woman who can keep going even when others can't. Tonight, you follow the last mistress standing. Her name is Catherine Ashley. People mostly remember her as Cat. Her role in Elizabeth of Ver is more complicated than most people like to admit. She wasn't officially a mistress. She wasn't a lover of a king, but she was something equally dangerous. She was a very important woman in the life of a queen who was raised in the ruins of her father's failed relationships. Cat had worked as a servant, a governess, and a confidant. She raised Elizabeth from a young girl who was smart and tired of being controlled by men into a woman who would never let herself be ruled by a man. But what makes Cat's story so special is not just who she advised, but what she saw. Unlike the women who were left alone, disgraced, or married off without anyone knowing, Cat survived. She dealt with all the problems caused by Henry's many wives, the religious conflicts between Protestants and Catholics, the accusations of treason, and the violent reign of Edward VI. She stood beside Elizabeth through scandal, through exile, and into the crown. She may not have slept with a king, but she understood power intimately. Some people think that Cat once carried letters between Elizabeth and Thomas Seymour, the brother of the Queen's late husband. He was both ambitious and inappropriately affectionate. Whether Cat was happy about the flirtation or just put up with it is not clear, but one thing is clear. She knew how dangerous love could be. She had seen it destroy queens and kill mistresses. And when Elizabeth narrowly avoided disaster during that episode, Cat changed. She held on to her queen-like armor. She was more than just a friend. She was a guardian. So, in a way, Cat was like a mistress, but not in a sexual way. She was more like a person who had a lot of influence. She had affection, loyalty, and access. Heber knew when to speak and when to leave things unsaid. And she knew how important it was to be on the right side of the court. This made her powerful. And having power in Tudor England was always dangerous for a woman. But if you want to know the real story of the royal mistress of the Tudor line, the last woman to ever hold the unofficial, dangerous role, it would be Lady Catherine Knollys, possibly the illegitimate daughter of Henry VIII and Mary Boleyn. Yes, that's Mary Boleyn. If that's true, then Catherine would be the king's daughter and Elizabeth of Thule would be her cousin or half-sister, depending on which historian you believe. Catherine was never officially recognized by the Henrys, but she was given an unusually important role at the royal court. She even served as chief lady of the bedchamber to Queen Elizabeth I. She slept in the same room as the queen, dressed her, and protected her privacy. That kind of role was not given to just anyone. Catherine was loyal, politically smart, and according to court gossip, one of the few people Elizabeth truly trusted. She knew how important it was to be close to the right people. And here's the strange symmetry of it all. The final mistress was not a lover of a king, but a woman who had been influenced by the royal lifestyle. The daughters of mistresses, the cousins of queens, the granddaughters of women who once risked everything for a crown. They were the ones left to deal with the consequences. Elizabeth never took her husband with her. She never got married, never had a child, and never let any man have power over her. Was that just a coincidence? No, she had seen too much. Her mother, in Berlin, had loved and lost more than she could have imagined. Her father had thrown away women like old roses, and the court had punished them all for being too pretty, too clever, too ambitious, and too present. Elizabeth knew how to play the game. She refused to play it. Instead, she became the first woman in English history to rule on her own. Cat Ashley was by her side during the early years of her reign. There were no lords or lovers, just women who remembered. In this final chapter, you meet more than one mistress. It's a family history, a story, a line of women, some with names, some without, who have all survived. Women who kept secrets, who were sometimes able to control the monarchy more than any sword or seal ever could. And here's the most ironic twist of all. When the Tudor dynasty ends, it isn't with a love affair. It ends with a woman who chose not to love publicly at all. The story that began with passion, poetry, and shaky hands in dark hallways ends in silence, control, and inheritance. You look back now on all the mistresses, Elizabeth Blunt, Mary Boleyn, Anne Jane, Catherine Howard, and all the others who were forgotten and didn't even have names. And you see them not as warnings, but as people who bravely went against the grain in a court that was quick to label people as saints or sinners. They weren't just playthings for kings. They were a reflection of the era in which they were used. And in the case of the last mistress standing, she stood for them all. You're lying back, perhaps with the fan softly humming in the background, and you're thinking, wait, was that all real? Oh yes. Every subtle glance, every whispered thread, every silk ribbon tied in the hair, not just for beauty, but for power, it all happened. These women didn't live in fairy tales or just as background characters. They lived in the difficult and exciting parts of royal life. They were not the queens you've heard about in ballads. They weren't always the ones that history remembers, but they were there in the soft spaces where empires rose and fell, wrapped in perfume, blood, and prayer. They are unforgettable for more than just the drama. It's about finding the right balance between love and power, being favored and being afraid, being secret and being remembered. They knew what it was like to be wanted by a king and hated by his court. They knew how to read other people, how to fold a letter just so, how to survive a smile that turned cold. And maybe most of all, they knew how dangerous it was to be visible and how much more dangerous it was to be forgotten. So tonight, you've gone behind the velvet curtains, past the neat lines of history books, and into the shadows where the real stories are. You've walked through the gardens, knelt at the altar, listened to the wind rattle the king's bedroom windows, and now, as the candle of the Tudor dynasty flickers out, you leave without saying anything bad, but with a kind of respect. They weren't perfect, but they existed and left traces that are still with us today. Now close your eyes. They're quiet again, but they were never really gone.